What if Bella caught in triple-sided apocalypse, part 2. But I am. It's only a little and Carlisle's here. Edward closed his eyes and huffed. Later. We have to keep moving. We had quickly made the decision to walk upstream, betting we would find a boat because there were many towns in the south and on the other side of the river. We figured chances were pretty good. Plan B was to get to the nearest road and continue towards Yukon territory. I hoped, like the others, that we did find one. It will be a time-consuming roundabout otherwise, plus we'd rather get far from the crazies. If the survivor tribe didn't act that way towards us, we would have had them come along. But it wasn't the case. It was so easy to leave them behind. Still, I hoped they would do fine and wouldn't hurt others. We weren't sure, however, if we were right about sticking to the woods. Many people in the area had, at least, basic camping knowledge. We rushed and found one at Fraser Valley not far from our camp. But it was small, only humans could fit. We walked across the narrow bridge, wide enough for one person, to the dock side. The Cullens held it down for us and Jacob took the steering wheel. While Jacob drove us across to the town on the other side, the Cullens followed in the water, pushing our boat as they swam. "Rgh," Brent groaned. He had been without painkillers for almost 10 hours. "Sorry," I squealed, as I helped Nicky redress his wound. After that, we gave him the last of our water and more painkillers. I made a mental note to be on the lookout for gallon jugs. I took a pill myself. My back ached from the weight. Nicky and Eric did too. I guessed I wasn't the only one. "Are you two okay?" I asked Jake and Quill. "Yeah, that was close. A bit," I admitted. "Thanks for saving us," he told the Cullens. "I'm sure you would do the same," Edward responded. "Well, they're getting along better, I think." I stifled a yawn. The sun would rise in a few hours. Another long day. I hoped it wouldn't drive me insane. I have to stop trying to keep track of the day's weight. The Cullens may be having more trouble with that. Esme mentioned that if she left something for later, it would end up being much, much later, not in the same day even. Unfortunately, we couldn't rest yet. We realized this was another open space area when we docked. The nearest house was about 2 miles away. "Let's find a place so Brent can rest," Carlisle said, and we climbed out to get to that house. It was empty according to Edward. We broke into the quaint, yellow, one-story house's back door and moved in. We quickly got Brent settled in, and then the others went to bed. "Do you need help?" I asked Edward. He shed his jacket. "No, not really." "Well, I'll help hang these out to dry. Are you sure you don't want to watch me strip?" he said, shirt halfway off. I flushed red and tried to move my gaze to my feet, but it got stuck on his flat stomach. "Grow up," I muttered, and snatched his shirt away. He chuckled. Esme followed the others to the other room to collect their pants, leaving the both of us alone. "Take off your pants," I said, turning my back to him. "No peeking," he joked. I didn't have to. I've seen Jacob and Quill naked 3 times already. I shuddered. Still, all right, I'm decent. I jumped. Hopefully he didn't notice I tried to peek, and turned around again. He was dressed pants and a versus neck that exposed his collarbone. "Which reminded me, you have to feed right away. I mean, your eyes are completely black now." He grabbed my wrist and pushed it out of his personal space. "I'm fine. You can go to bed. You're trying to delay the inevitable. Let's go someplace else," he said softly, grabbed my hand and took us outside. He explained why as soon as we were a few yards away. I wanted to be considerate. "They're starving too. It wouldn't be fair to my family if I got to eat." "Well, they know you need it. They wouldn't punish you for it. It's just this once, and then you'll be careful." "Bella, what?" He didn't answer, but he kept walking towards the trees near where we docked. "Edward, did that time affect you?" I sighed. I thought he understood me then. I knew he had trouble willing himself to stop, but to me the point was that he did. He was stronger than what he gave himself credit for. I would have to show him then. I grabbed his face and pulled him to me, more like myself to him since he was stronger. He immediately kissed back, soft as usual, but then his enthusiasm increased. He wrapped an arm around my back and the other around my thigh, picked me up. Wind rushed around me, blowing locks of my hair around. It dissipated when my back was pressed against a tree. I clawed at my jacket, looking for the zipper with one hand, not wanting to let go of him. He found it, swiftly pulled it down and moved my head to the side. I clenched my jaw. I remembered how badly it hurt. I gripped his arms tightly, breathing erratic. He drew a long breath in through his nose, trailing it down my neck. RGHG eared. I screamed. He quickly covered my mouth and drank. The pain from the bite melted away into the resulting lightheadedness. 6, 7, 8, I counted. I could hear him swallowing mouthfuls. 10. I wriggled in his grip, stars beginning to dance in my eyesight. Stop, I said, and patted his back hard. His lips were looser on my neck for a moment, then jumped back. Edward, I said louder. He let me go and braced himself against the tree, hands on either side of my face, head down. He whipped his head back, his face facing the night sky, eyelids closed and a happy smile on his face. Edward, I touched the side of my neck with my hand. There wasn't any blood on it, so he must have sealed it. I'm okay, he said. He looked down, with that smile still on his face, eyes dark red. I was hoping it would be easier. After I left, I was thinking of coming back, not 24 hours later, you know. Coming back, I've decided I'd rather work harder to keep you safe than stay away from you. Didn't you learn that first time? I joked, beginning to fall forward. He picked me up so fast I didn't even notice. True, he carried me back to the house in his arms, my head on his shoulder. Tired from today's events and being Edward's cure, my eyes drooped until they closed. It was quiet when we walked through the living room, but I was sure the Cullens were there. He took me to the one of 2 bedrooms I would share with Nikki and tucked me into B. Wait, stay with me. We haven't slept together in forever. We never slept together. He laughed softly. I supposed not technically. Vampires didn't sleep, but I was thinking of something else. Hopefully he couldn't feel the heat from my cheeks. When I woke up the next morning, Edward was still there, watching me from the seat in the corner, like he would in my old room. His hand was no longer bandaged, perfect. Just like him. He smiled and said, Nikki didn't see me. I left for the few minutes she woke and went downstairs, then came back. I didn't want her to be uncomfortable. My thoughts exactly. I'll forgive that, I said with a smile. My eyes wandered to the window. It looked to be close to noon. Oh no, are we behind schedule now? Don't worry about it, you needed the rest. We'll leave as soon as you're dressed. I got out of bed and pulled on my boots he must have taken off for me. Downstairs everyone waited. Jacob's eyes followed me as I took out a can of beans for me to eat, and took the can of peaches in syrup from Edward. After a few days of the bean diet I was starting to suffer the effects. I hope I adapt to it soon, I thought as I pulled my hair back. You fed on her, Jacob said. I turned and immediately reached up to touch my exposed neck. Jacob glanced at Edward's healed hand. We can't have another disabled person. No offense, I said. Brent looked on silently. Your hand could have healed. Jacob said to Edward. It's my body, Jacob. You offered. I saved the hand that saved you. Now let's go. He clenched his jaw and tensed up but didn't say anything. Let's move out, Jasper said. We crossed the open space diagonally to the nearest road to cut time, to hopefully find a car and get to Denali faster. Thankfully Jacob didn't say anything more, but I wondered if he was struggling to accept the world he was now a part of, especially being a werewolf himself. At least we have Quill, at least he wasn't alone. Think they'd come after us? Eric asked. I asked around a mouthful. No, they wouldn't go out of their way to do that, but other survivors from the attack must know about us too. Jasper said. We should avoid all humans, at least until we're far from here. Sounds about right, Carlyle said. He wasn't happy about killing James then, he was less happy about the idea of having to kill humans if it came down to it. But there was no question, if they wielded torches, it would have to be done. The Cullens were as vulnerable as we were when you think about it. I'm not sure if a human kill is worse or harder to deal with than a vampire kill. I didn't care for James, I still don't. I just know a Cullen death is worse. I would choose that the human threat die. Knowing that added to the stress. We already have zombies to deal with. More death is unnecessary. We didn't find a new ride at first. The gas tanks were either empty or close to it. Emmett and Jasper tore a few gas tanks out and siphoned gas from the other cars into them using a long tube they got from the last house. Later we found a truck with half a tank a few meters down Lougheed Highway, filled it and piled in. Though a truck would leave at least 4 of us exposed in the trunk bed, it would be great for storing more supplies, and Brent, who had months until his wound was healed enough. Edward, Jasper, Esme, Alice, Emmett, and Rosalie sat in front, away from the sunlight. Carlisle sat in the bed under a blanket. They drove slowly so as not to burn too much gas too fast, and weaved around the cars strewn all over the road. I watched the blur of the trees as we passed them, and the light breeze blew through my hair. Hopefully it blew my scent away from the Cullens. "Are you going to turn into one of them?" Jacob asked. The others were silent, but I felt like they were all listening. "No, I would be screaming if I were." "You say that like it happened before." "It did. I didn't fall down the stairs back then. Nomadic vampires were in town and they decided to play a game. I thought that blew. I mean, Edward did it." "Of course not. He sucked the venom out. Pucker your lips and your own venom won't go into the person." There was a thud and I turned to see Emmett move his head forward again. "Let's just not say the B word," I whispered. "And none of them will lose control. They've been living amongst us for decades. If they won't lose control, why can't we say the B word?" "That's enough," I screamed. "You're not helping. We're all hungry, so shut up. I know we've been through a lot of shit, and I know you lost a lot and even a little of yourself, but that's no excuse. We all lost something, but we still have each other. Quill's still here, I'm still here. Consider yourself lucky. You can live off of human food but the Cullens can't, so stop being an asshole." I was in La Push too. I'm still freaking out about what happened back there, and I saw more in Forks. I know you can't accept being a werewolf yet, but we have to remain clear-headed and calm as best as we can or we'll be useless, understand?" I urged, gripping his shoulders. I scurried back to my seat when my tears started to flow. I lost family too, and it hurts, but I still have everyone else and I'm more focused on keeping what I have. So can you please get along already? There's nothing in the way but you, Jacob. I squeaked out. My mind replayed people's deaths that I saw, and I rubbed my face as if that would help. I knew I didn't express what I felt before, but I didn't want to look back. The Cullens and especially Edward were good distractions, but we were still breaking into people's abandoned homes, food still out, flies all around, children's toys all over, evidence of life everywhere but no one there, and moving, always moving, and reminders that everything is different now everywhere you looked. "I'm sorry, it's all so unnatural." Jacob choked out. "I don't know. I already knew people did bad things, that the vampire race was split as well. I guess I thought nothing was more unnatural than people hurting people. Not even the existence of vampires or werewolves. Or maybe that didn't matter to me either. Bad people are bad, good people are good, we just fight. I don't think you're unnatural, far from it." Carlisle gripped Jacob's shoulder as Nikki did mine. "I'm sorry I can't help you very much, but I can offer you support." I heard Carlisle say, "You're really strong." Nikki said to me, "Really? Definitely," she affirmed with a smile. My eyes drifted from her Eric behind her who sat hugging his knees with his head down. Nikki followed. "He's in love with one of our best friends, Angela." Her name suited her perfectly. He and Brent were the only ones who didn't have friends in our group. Nikki had Carlisle, and I had stopped being a good friend months ago. Actually, I was never a friend. I just sat with them, and they had invited me. She's definitely gone. Oh, working as a nurse I've seen many people die, but I was desensitized earlier on when I lost my mom to cancer. I was taking care of her. She explained. But you too, you don't have that. I'm sorry for your loss. Don't be. We all did our best. Since then I just focused on helping people, doing my best. She said with a smile. It wasn't curved, but straight, like she had accepted she had no control over what happened to those she helped. I know, and I know those people knew too. Her smile curved a bit then. I looked over her shoulder again and Eric was still staring at the truck bed. I know you're thinking, it isn't fair, Eric. Nikki said. It's not, he responded. Everything was going great before. Angela and I got accepted to the same college. I felt like shit then. I hadn't known, but would have if I paid attention. I just don't feel like she's really gone. She isn't, I said. No one will ever forget her. I never will, and neither will you. I'm sure she thought of you. Yeah, I'm probably a stranger now, but don't you be, okay? He shook his head. I always stood up for you. I know you were dealing with your own stuff, so did Angie. I know. I owe you. Friends never owe each other anything. I half smiled. Thanks. We can have a funeral for her, whenever you're ready. I added after a beat. We can do it for everyone. Nikki chimed, gripping my hand with hers and Eric's arm. Angie will always be in our memories, but we can say a proper goodbye to the physical her. Yeah, that sounds nice. He agreed. We stopped at the next town, a really tiny one called Desroches, so the Cullens could find another butcher shop. There had to be one nearby considering the open space. It must be brimming with blood sources. Edward stayed with us to raid the houses in town to stock up while the others scoured the town. We had barely covered a 20-meter radius around our truck when they came back. Fucking nothing. Emmett growled and kicked a mailbox out of the ground. Rosalie tried to comfort him, but I could tell she was suffering too. She was angry, from thirst, not merely annoyed as she usually was. We did find a mini-mart and general store a mile from here. Esme said, I saw Emmett killing a bear before it woke up. We might find a bear's den if we head to the forest right now. Alice said, you're not suggesting we split up now. Quill said, theirs isn't a choice. Jasper said, keep going up the road and cross the river, there should be another town next to Abbotsford. Search more there. Who knows how many we'll find. He told Edward, we can modify a small refrigeration unit to keep the blood you collect, like a blood bank. Nikki said, we'll do that later. Carlisle said, we'll be gone for 12 hours maximum. Be safe. They ran off again, unable to wait. Won't we need electricity for the mini fridge? Eric asked. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. We'd only need a generator to do that, and fuel. Nikki said, I once saw a video about 2 African girls modifying one to run on urine. But I don't remember anything else. Looking at each other, we knew none of us humans knew about generators, so we looked at Edward. I honestly never looked into it. He looked at Eric. Why are you looking at me? Is it because I'm Chinese? Edward grinned and tried to recover, unsuccessfully. Goodness, no, I was merely wondering. Well, I don't know anything about it. I know car engines and a generator's main part is one, right? Nikki gave a combination of a shrug and nod. Maybe if I fiddled with it we could end up with something. Edward sighed. We got back on Lougheed Highway and drove to the little stores Esme mentioned that were right beside it. The general store was also a deli, and a few meters up the road was the mini-mart attached to a gas station. The smell of rotting lunch meat hit us in the face as soon as we opened the door. It must have been rotting in the refrigeration unit for about a week. It's been a little over a week since we left Forks, when stores were still running. Hey, they're still running, Eric cried, and pressed his hands against the glass. Edward went behind the counter and I looked around with Nikki, who went into the snack aisle. I ended up in the small instant coffee section and grabbed a few jars for possible night watches. It's me, Tanya, I heard Edward say. I immediately felt ridiculous for reacting that way. We're still pretty far. Is everything all right? I heard a bag of chips open and some munching. I went back to the front to double bag my find, and couldn't help but glance at Edward as I did so. I am too. And you. Good. Keep yourselves safe. Rosalie didn't have service on her cell phone. Landline phones seem to still work, but I don't know for how long. I plan we'll get to Denali before they go down. We have an injured man. We can't leave him. We'll get there. He promised. Did you hear of any news? From other parts of Canada, or the UK? No, we'd like to avoid military. I may never tell you why. We have humans with us, so you know. Yes, it will be lonely to be the only vegetarian family alive. He said almost coldly. We'll get there as soon as we can. You too. Coffee, I said, patting the bag when he turned around. This place is such a ways away, all of the junk food is still intact. Got some crackers too, they'll last about a year. We have to stock up on these, and dry beans. Nikki said, returning from the back with her arms full. I held out a bag for her to dump them in and she ran back. Let's finish up and head out. Edward sighed. With bagfuls of instant coffee, bags of rice, beans, crackers, bottled water, sports drinks and chips. We piled into the car to hit the mini-mart. There was also a pizzeria attached to it where we found more drinks. I was ecstatic at first but remembered we still needed to ration it just in case. Afterwards we continued up the road and drove past Harrison Mills, which wasn't even a neighborhood let alone town with its mere 3 buildings scattered in it. Why did Jasper say to go down here? How does he know there's a town there? Eric asked. He thought. Towns are small and grouped together in this area it seems. Edward explained. Oh, right, mind reader. Makes sense to me. We just passed about 4 places and were barely 2 hours from the border. I think, I said. Not even a half hour. We aren't a half hour away from the border. You're kidding, Quill muttered. I wanted to bang my head against the dashboard. Driving, I meant, we had to walk half of that distance. We'll get there, he swore. So long as we stay in a car, we'll get there soon. I asked. 2 full days max. We'll keep moving when the others return. For now let's try to get some more useful things before nightfall. We drove to a gases in which we switched onto the 9 to move the Fraser River. The sun and beams created creepy shadows on the street that became a lot emptier than Toll Road 1 we traveled on for a quick even as in Abbotsford. You may see the mountains of British Columbia from here, and there has been not anything however trees as some distance as my eyes may want to see. But when we got closer to the opposite seas, there regarded to be a destroy further down the lengthy winding avenue. Which meant greater open area, and I didn't like that. My eyes drifted lower back to the mountains. You couldn't see Mount Rainier from Forks, but you'll be capable of see those mountains even from the center of the upcoming metropolis. It'd have to be colder up there due to the better altitude. It turned into March nevertheless, I suppose. It was chilly, less warm without a jacket, and it'd get chillier the farther we went up north. Bad concept to be up there then. Similarly down the road we were nonetheless flanked by means of trees, and I realized I used to be wrong. The timber had been just shorter here than in Forks. The mountains towered next to us about half of a mile away. The street was nonetheless pretty empty too, as if the human beings hopped onto the Trans-Canadian Dual Carriageway 1. We soon reached the sign that allow us to recognize we have been approaching Chilliwack. Smaller, handmade symptoms stuck into the ground had arrows pointing to the left and stated there were strawberries and fireworks. There can be animal farms here too, Edward murmured. Perhaps we ought to have hen for dinner. Chook is the most common farm animal proper. But who would pluck it? We with the aid of handed the 2 exits on the highway and persevered on the principal road, and soon I should see homes via the timber. Jasper changed into proper. There has been every other city subsequent to Abbotsford. The road curved to the right so we quite an awful lot backtracked. I needed to remind myself to be affected person. In a while, there was another sign that stated that motorway 1 turned into up ahead, but we remembered it wasn't drivable, so we became onto Yale Road and persevered to the heart of Chilliwack. I smell chickens, Edward stated, and breathed in deeply. Think they may be still alive? I asked. A few slightly, if we are fortunate. It'd mean meat and eggs for you. I nodded and started sucking on my backside lip. Well, meat came from someplace. I started out looking away and noticed black dots inside the distance. They weren't shifting however then I could not see well from far away. We came across a gasoline station on the side of the road, however its doors have been extensive open, trash strewn at the ground like they have been blown out from inside. Need do we look through it anyway? Quill asked. I started out choosing up the bat and fireplace poker we had. We need weapons, I concept as I held them. We should wait until we have more safety. Allows just try to no longer waste time. I stated. She's proper, you can not do tons with that. Brent stated. There ought to be looking shops in town. I will observe the scent of gunpowder to 1 if I choose up on something. Edward stated. Eric shut the door and we saved going. Do any of how to fire a gun? Brent requested. We had been silent. I in no way held a gun before, not to mention Hearth 1. What approximately you? Lived for centuries and by no means picked one up. I by no means wished a gun for looking, and I have best lived 97 years. Best 97, Brent repeated. It truly is a chunk vintage. Eric said. I'm still only a 17-12 months antique. For all time. What's that like? Eric asked extra seriously. I stared at Edward. Not as cool as you would suppose. There is most effective so many matters that you could occupy yourself with that interest you. That is why we are thankful for video games. He joked. Eric then became the communication into a history lesson on the primary years of gaming. I misplaced interest and persisted searching out the windows. The amount of trees lessened, and houses with large front and back yards commenced appearing on the side of the road. Edward started out slowing down. Why are you? Eric started. Shish, Edward stated, and pointed to the left. There has been a person standing close to the aspect of the residence. It isn't always human, Edward stated, and started out riding again, however slower, as we watched to look if the zombie could hear us from that distance. It endured to drag its feet as we exceeded, and Edward pressed the gasoline pedal a bit extra. The next residence came into view proper away, sitting only a few feet away, and the zombie there straight away noticed us and started jogging in the direction of us, flailing at his hands, mouth agape, and growling. We braced ourselves as Edward shot us ahead. Looking in the back of me, the one we were looking to cross disregarded with the aid of heard the opposite's growls and became now walking after us too. Even though I was in the vehicle, my adrenaline made my coronary heart race, but I started to pressure myself to breath deeply as they began to vanish into the gap. Are you all right, Brent? Edward asked. Yeah, I will stay. He groaned. I dug into one among our luggage to get him painkillers. Let's hold your eyes peeled. Edward saw-ed to us. We checked out every other in the rearview mirror for a moment before I became to hand Brent the capsules. I is probably scared, but I'd discover ways to protect myself. They should have been trapped here through the blocked motorway. Brent stated. Safe to say a number of the residents are still on the town then. I muttered, and gave him a Gatorade. Later on, Edward stopped us at a store promoting used gadgets like chairs and kennels, and Edward quick went in and brought a kennel. There may be one close by, he stated as he were given in. Have to we get more liquor earlier than we move? I asked Nikki. A few bottles to final us till we get more real medical resources and tablets. She stated. Edward wordlessly went and did that. Wanna get me drunk, Brent said to her. It's on your wounds. Exactly. Nikki 1-2 grimaced and grinned at that. Looking guns too, I added. And guys' garments. Eric inputted. Brent's had a bare leg for a while now. There have to be greater stores down the street. Edward stated. He were given in and persevered using. Soon sufficient. A big area replaced the houses and Edward drove over the open area to a barn. It smelled like death. We groaned and protected our mouths and noses. We had been a few yards away but it become strong. I'm going to have a glance. Edward stated. I pulled a Cullen's headscarf until it become loose and wrapped it around my face and followed. I ran to the barn, not at all like the pink barn I had imagined, and located Edward watching the lifeless chickens that had their heads cut off. Or bit off. Live lower back, I realize. He appeared around on the floor, finally picked up a rock, and threw it in her. No foul zombies. He became round and grabbed hand. Wager not. Chickens don't run. They would not be danger if they have been. He stated as we walked returned. Still though. Animals may be zombies too proper. I assume so, but I think flesh is as nutritious to them as it'd be to you. Not at all. They waste away until they die. Human zombies simply take longer. That is properly. We will simply get our protein from beans then. The remaining factor we need is vengeful livestock. Edward chuckled and pulled me near breath in my scent. The others groaned when we climbed lower back in. Arg, you added it with you. Let's get out of here. I couldn't help however grin then. As quickly as we came across a thrift keep, we went in and commenced pulling matters off in their hangars. I observed a smell. None folks had bathed for 2 days, so I quickly modified into any other shirt and left mine on the ground. I looked round as I constant the brand new one round me and noticed Jacob's head from rows behind me. He turned into searching down so he probably did not see whatever. I put my jackets again on. The mustard-colored hand-me-down from Charlie and a looking jacket from the Cullens. For a second I concept I ought to leave it so I didn't get connected, however determined towards leaving it at the back of. We left whilst we had accrued a few baskets complete of shirts, blankets, and winter apparel, and came out carrying a number of it. We placed the baskets in the again and blanketed it with a blanket to guard it. We should have reached our destination because similarly down the street we determined a handful of pharmacies now not too far away from the thrift shop. They have all been raided before but we took gloves, and something drug we ought to use in keeping with Nikki. Live alive regardless of what Nikki. I am gonna want years to research from you. I said half joking. Afterwards, Edward drove us south to the supply of the gunpowder fragrance he picked up on. With no one round, we went interior leaving Brent in the truck. The automobile combined in nicely enough and we had been going to be quick besides. The Dart and Address store still had a few guns on their shelves, miraculously, even though I assume all of us already owned something. Absolutely everyone pretty a lot did in Forks. Can we just take everything? Eric requested. Pretty much. Equip yourselves with what feels comfy. None of the weapons are loaded, bullets are on the alternative facet, but make certain they are for that gun specially. Also, you may want to have a knife on you. You stated you didn't recognize something about guns. I said, following him into an aisle. Newton attempted to show off once I went into the store once. Oh, he began searching rifles, which had been best at taking pictures from lengthy distances, and scopes that I found out functioned like magnifying glass once I held one in the front of my eye. He regarded peculiar with a gun in his hands. He additionally seemed like this turned into simply his first time searching for a rifle too. I perused the aisle and drifted to the next. The archery segment. There had been longbows, the sort you at once think of when you consider bows, however there were others that regarded completely badass. They had been compound bows, made of various parts held together by way of bolts. As opposed to one curve, it was concave in the middle. Piles of arrows with one-of-a-kind shade feathers at the ends sat below them. You can run out of bullets, however you can reuse those, I notion, rubbing the thin steel rods. Most compound bows have been colorful, but I chose an all-black one and matching arrows with neon green feathers, so that they had been less complicated to locate. I looked round a few greater and discovered arm guards, chest guards and gloves for archers, and quivers for the arrows. Should I wear them, or deliver them? I determined to take off my jacket and wear all of it beneath it. I did not recognize what the chest guard became for, however determined not to chance it. Edward later determined me adjusting the strap of the quiver, knives and a package of black straps in his hand. Countless ammo, I said, properly questioning. Identical with these, he stated, and knelt to connect the knives to my left thigh. I should sense the coldness of his hand through my pants. I blushed after I felt him contact my internal thigh. Too tight. And no, it is true. You're thinner. I couldn't inform earlier than. He squeezed my sides gently. I suppose the garments I finished up in didn't cover it. Nicely. I'll consume more when we get to Denali. No earlier than this you had been already thinner than before. Let's now not communicate about before this. It doesn't remember. Okay. He relented. I smirked and patted his chest. Suitable. We again to the front of the shop, jacket and rifles in hand, to examine the handguns that had been on display on the wall. The others were already there. Jacob and Quill had been specially interested by them. Remember, these are just for zombies and people that are a danger to you. Wait earlier than you operate it. Edward saw to us. He helped us select them and checked all the items to make sure we had been suitable to move. We had 3 rifles, a sword, a machete need to had been the guy's concept, some searching knives, my bow and arrows, and a handgun for every folks, including the Cullens, though they would not want them, so some of us should undergo double. This isn't always as cool as it might be, Eric muttered. With maximum of the haul packed in a black duffel bag, we left the store and quietly piled into the truck. I rode shotgun, maintaining my jacket in palms. Edward drove toward the alternative side of Metropolis, sticking to Lougheed Motorway, to save time in place of looking forward to the rest of the Cullens in the center of city. Have we glance through the city medical institution? I requested. Hospitals have pharmacies in them wherein patients select up their prescriptions after being discharged, and a storage room where a myriad of medicinal drugs are saved. It have to be close by. Maximum possibly others are keeping off it. Most likely because it was overrun too. Do you watch we can move? Nikki requested. There may be zombies. It is able to be precise for practice, but we ought to seek book keep for Avenue Atlas first. Edward countered. We ought to cut up. Eric recommended. No longer while it's just me. Edward answered. We will vote. I stated. Who wants to see zombies close up again? Eric said. Jacob, Edward, Nikki, and that I raised our arms. Who desires to play stiff off till later? Eric, Quill, Brent and I raised our hands. You don't remember, Edward stated to Brent. Do too, Bella. I'm indecisive. Both, or, we'll have to do it in some unspecified time in the future. I said nervously. That's 3 towards 4. Clinic it is. Can I stay inside the vehicle? Eric and Quill stated. No, we chorused. Edward drove up to the overall health center's front, which wasn't that huge. I suppose, it was built in a current fashion so it became difficult to tell. It is large. Ugh, why are we here again? Eric moaned. To locate extra meds in case any people get wounded. We need to have sufficient, for as lengthy because it takes for something to trade. Nikki stated. Come on Eric, it will get less difficult, however you need to begin. I said. However they're people. You saw Connor. I noticed a whole lot of people, however they are not human anymore. They're flesh-consuming zombies, Eric. You will prevent for them, but they may not stop for you. Do not you want to discover ways to guard yourself? It is great, he can live within the automobile. I'm parking it within the lot. Edward stated and persevered forward. He parked the truck near the nook of the building and we got out. Jacob and Quill pulled out their blade weapons, Nikki the firepoker, and Edward pulled out 2 weapons and started loading them. Is that for me? I asked. Sort of. I learn how to use one before I let you handle one in your personal. Recall, hold your fingers instantly and robust, and count on a bounce. The flinch constantly freaks beginners out. Brent suggested. Thank you. And if a bullet gets caught, just pull the pinnacle element lower back and shake the bullet into the barrel. It's us or them, Eric grumbled, and climb out with the bat in his hand. Never thought Bella Swan might be courageous even though. I am now not, I just don't have preference. I said with a shrug. May not bullets make too much noise? There might be many. With these we are able to hold the horde lower back. Edward answered. Let's be short about it. We ran up the ramp and Edward advised that we stay together earlier than pushing the door open. There had been papers everywhere in the floor, and the cell phone at the reception desk was placing off of the side of the desk. The ready room looked like it suffered a stampede. And there has been blood, smeared at the floor, on the walls via arms and different matters. I chewed on my lip. The fluorescent lighting fixtures had been nonetheless on, sort of. Some were not, others dim, vivid or have been about to fall from the ceiling. We walked across the viable accident region. It ought to be round right here, both at the floor ground or the first. Nikki said. And the garage room? Edward asked. The basement. Guns in hand and Edward within the lead, we made our way through the first pair of double doorways. I right away started searching round, no longer to see the gore or watch out for zombies. The place was strange and that I didn't need to wander away. Beyond the one's doors became an excellent large waiting room, the one we handed changed into extra as a foyer thing. There has been the table in which you acquire the clipboards and paperwork and subsequent to it changed into the drugstore. It become messy. There had been prescriptions scattered on the floor and some stuff became taken, but it failed to seem like different survivors came right here. Bella, include me, Edward sighed. Why? I asked, my nervousness starting to get to me. I need you close. We're going to see if there is anybody here. I concept you stated we weren't splitting up. I requested, following him down the corridor anyway wherein the maternity ward changed into. In which just going to test the halls down right here and stairwells fast. I stuck near his heels, telling myself to be privy to the knives on my thigh as I held an arrow between my hands, bow loaded. We carefully looked via the doorways that had been slightly ajar to check if every body turned into interior. They had been empty or employees and patients and so were the stairwells but we hadn't long passed upstairs but. Done, Edward asked quietly whilst we back. After gentle chorus of, yups we made our manner through the ward, and Edward and that I went up the stairs beforehand of the others before telling them the coast became clear. This part of the building ought to had been entirely for toddlers due to the fact up right here become wherein the toddlers have been held with a few greater rooms for labor. It had the standard ground to ceiling glass wall with some cribs status up proper, difference knocked over, and some babies laid dismembered. I gasped softly and quick became and pulled the others ahead in order that they failed to see. There has been a break, a touch hole that caused every other facet and in all likelihood a bridge to any other a part of the building, then the rest had been the extra hard work rooms. We carefully made our way through that short corridor and stopped on the windows to have a look at the sectioned off building. Every floor had a strip of window going round it. Searching at Edward the First should see, he debated approximately risking it. If my guess was proper, the storage room will be stocked with an ample quantity of real scientific elements, so we would not have to prevent for that once more, and maybe, just maybe, the blood banks were nonetheless walking and there was a few. The lighting fixtures were nonetheless on here. My grip on my arrow tightened. This is ideal. In case you're all okay with it, we will go to that constructing. It appears this is the facet. I think we're going to discover what we're seeking out thereafter, which a few. Eward said. Jacob, Quill and Eric looked a ways from as much as it. And split up there. Jacob requested. I assume we've hooked up. Splitting up isn't always an awesome concept and I'm involved for Brent. Edward checked out them, his hand locating mine. Nicky comes with us of course, so Jacob, you'll lead them return to the auto. Jacob nodded. Give us your gun. Be careful, he stated gravely, and gave Edward the gun he took earlier than leaving. Edward then took the protection off of the 3 weapons had and handed Nicky and I one. Be careful, he instructed us. Recall what Brent stated. We nodded. He nodded lower back and silently led us into the bridge. We failed to permit the doors slam to hold the detail of surprise on our side and crossed the bridge. From the symptoms I knew Edward become right. The experts have been right here, and, from my stays at hospitals, I knew in-house patients had been right here too, making it the primary building. I gripped my gun tightly with sweaty palms, my index finger curled around the loop in the front of the trigger. I admit, this scene induced my memories and worry from what happened in Forks. So the storage room is commonly within the basement, huh? Edward requested. Yeah, normally. Edward, what about blood banks? I asked. I used to be thinking the identical thing, however I don't assume it is good have that nearby, or near Jasper. Sure, but we may not have to build a fridge to save the blood, we are able to simply take one. There's a possibility you could discover an undercounter one. Nicky said. The storage room first, then we'll try to discover it. We discovered every other stairwell, waited for any sounds, and slowly made our manner down, distance among us, and cautiously and fast slinked to the stairs main to the basement. It changed into a small maze in itself, but we observed it. Nicky and that I served as lookout as Edward ripped off the keypad lock. It become completely untouched. We stuffed our luggage and wallet to the brim before leaving. We decided to head again the way we got here, longer than locating some other exit, however we knew it was empty. Move back to the automobile, Bella and I'm able to search for the fridge. Edward said. Are you sure? It is quicker. If I locate an undercounter I will convey it, and it is less complicated to have to shield simply one individual. I see. Hurry again. Just wait 10 minutes. Edward delivered. He grabbed my hand and pulled me away before she may want to say whatever. Edward maintained his grip on my hand as we half ran through the ground, Edward breathing in deeply to capture a whiff of whatever that might leads us to the blood. The main building become plenty larger, which intended we had more floor to cowl and more corners to look around. We observed the vicinity in which blood donations had been processed, and it had many refrigerators full of blood under the desks the personnel worked on. Swimming pools of blood have been on the ground, and I checked out Edward, involved for him, but he had mouthful of air. He immediately got to work, lightly pulling the unit out and locating out how to detach it from the wall while I watched the halls through the slightly open door. I concerned the zombies right here, if there were any, were wandering about, however we hadn't visible any. I had observed that, for some purpose, they stood in location, slightly swaying, within the fields until a legitimate grabbed their attention. Any sound, now not always a human's voice. Edward's idea changed into that they sooner or later expire. It made feel, and I could not wait until all of them dropped dead. Theirs turned into probably not a whole lot longer than, considering the fact that it's been approximately 2 weeks. However, perhaps they had been hibernating to hold whatever it was that kept them going. Rabies did not have a symptom like this according to Nicky. I am sure she might have cited it if there was. Eric's notion could not be actual, ought to it. Why could the authorities create something like this, or maybe try it? Then again, Bella. I jumped and huffed a short snort of embarrassment. He carried the unit below an arm and held his gun with his different hand, leaving me by myself, and I accompanied at the back of him, looking behind me to make certain not anything become coming from the halls we simply left. I ran into Edward and didn't pick out up on what came about proper away. Run, run, Edward screamed. He dropped the unit and pushed me at the same time. As I caught myself from falling, I heard the running footsteps and looked behind me. Edward was already shooting at them and blocking some with his forearm, but not all were focused on him. One pushed through and in 3 strides he crossed the distance and tackled me to the ground. Bella. My grip on my gun didn't fail and the life or death situation gave me the strength I needed to keep its face away. It was strong and its spit thick, so I slid slightly to the side to avoid any of its saliva and blood from getting on my face. I mustered my courage and let go for half a second and shot a hole through his head. My finger spasmed and the gun went off a few times, grazing a zombie, hitting their limbs and a lucky shot up through underneath one's chin. "Let's go," Edward screamed, and hooked his arm around my torso, half carrying me as he ran to the bridge we came from, the unit in his other arm. The horde ran after us, lagging only a few feet behind. I pushed myself to run faster, knowing they'd follow us down to the truck and that we'd have to jump on time into the truck bed. Edward busted through the doors. The zombies' speed and weight pushed the doors open, allowing them in, only a few falling to the ground. We were halfway across the bridge when one of the doors opened and there was Jacob. "Come on, hurry." Seeing him gave me extra energy and I ran faster. As soon as we made it through, Jacob pushed in our steel bat through the door handles that kept the doors from opening. They were sort of pushing. We kept running as fast as we were with Jacob and didn't stop until we jumped into the truck bed. "Eng," I grunted, when my body collided into the metal. "Drive," Jacob yelled. "Heh. Nikki said you'd take 10 minutes, so when you were running late I went to see what was taking so long." Jacob laughed. I sat up without looking at him. I didn't know I was gritting my teeth and tearing up until Edward laid a hand on shoulder. "Are you okay?" he asked, slightly out of breath. "Why yeah," I said, blinking the tears back. I knew I wasn't scared, it just all happened in seconds seemingly. With cold, unshaking hands I put the safety back on and gave it back to Edward. "Where to?" Brent said. He had moved himself to the driver's seat. "The bridge leading into Harrison Mills. The others will meet us there if they haven't beaten us to it. We'll have better luck finding a road atlas in a bigger town, but I don't want to delay anymore." Edward answered. "All right. What's in Denali anyway?" Quill asked. "A long time ago we crossed paths with another vegetarian family who settled in Denali, Alaska. They've already begun building a wall around their house using the surrounding trees last I spoke with one of them. The cold temperature must have slowed down the rate of infection there at least." Nikki grunted in agreement. "So there's more of you," Quit said. Many more, Edward repeated. He rubbed his forehead, suddenly stressed. I realized that zombies weren't our only problem, or where it ended. But if it took 24 hours for cities to be destroyed, and the world was aware of the disease being a pandemic when it was classified as that, then maybe they've begun to work on something for it, or at least started preparing to preserve their people. Right, if we rebuilt soon then we'd be fine before starving traditional vampires became a problem. Edward began to look over the blood bank and I could see now that there were a few bags in it. Edward made sure the others couldn't see through the glass as he looked at the damage from being dropped. I switched positions to be the hero. "I'm pretty sure I make a great getaway driver," Brent said. "You still saved the day," I told him with lopsided smile. I was calmer and had caught my breath but was a little sweaty, so I shed my jacket. With no cops enforcing the law, Brent drove faster than the speed limit, creating a steady rush of air that cooled me off. The back of my shirt and the hair on my neck were dry by the time we made it to the bridge that crossed the Harrison River. And waiting for us halfway across were the Cullens, fully fed. The plan was to get to Denali as soon as possible, before anything happened there, which Carlyle didn't say, out loud at least. They knew the way there by car by heart. A map would be useful, but if we were only going one way then perhaps it wasn't useful to us after all. Edward told them about the blood bags that were in the unit, still good and cold. The blood probably had 2 weeks since they were new additions to the blood bank, and blood had a shelf life of over 40 days. When there was electricity anyway. They tore a car on the highway apart for its engine and the Cullens began trying to figure out how they could turn it into a generator in the truck bed. We drove away from Harrison Mills, still on the low-heat highway, that would merge with the Trans-Canada Highway in Hope, about a half hour away, which would take us as far up north as Cache Creek. There we'd have to take the 97 to Chetwynd and go on a different road there that took us through Yukon and into Alaska. We stopped to collect gas whenever we came across gas stations, siphoning out the remaining gas from where it was stored under the concrete we stood on. It was about 1,796 miles to Denali from here, and the truck could only cover 350 miles per gallon. We wouldn't run out anytime soon since the tank was close to full and we already had a container full of gas as well. But after 700 miles we'd be out, and to not avoid becoming stranded could potentially put us in a vulnerable position. We drove down the winding road that had a wall of stone on he left as if a mountain was cut through, trees growing on top of it. Every now and again we stopped for bathroom breaks and took the opportunity to put in some target practice. None of us were hunters, let alone knew how to shoot. At best we were fishermen, including myself. I did my business quickly and took up the gun I used back at the hospital. I was lucky I hadn't shot Edward. "Bella, what are you doing?" Edward saw Ed. I jumped slightly and missed my target by a few inches. I had to stop being a jumper. Practicing. Or trying to. I could have shot you back there. Who knows what damage that would have caused. "'S not like you've been shot before," I said. "No, I haven't yet. Let me help you." "No, I can do it myself." I shot at the knot on the tree I was aiming at before. The bark and wood was splintered, nothing like the gore I had seen. "Perhaps it was wrong of me to bring you with me to get the unit." "It wasn't. You would have been in trouble on your own," I said, my head turned to look at him as I took the magazine out. "Yeah, I would have been gone," he said solemnly. It was odd that even vampires were as vulnerable as humans were. Almost demoralizing. I pushed that thought away and counted the bullets. 7. I mumbled and did the match in my head. The pistol could only hold 13 rounds, unless I had a cartridge full of reloads, then every bullet counted. Actually, every bullet did count. They couldn't be reused. We'd have to find more ammo. "Okay, ready to go," Jacob called as he walked back to us. I put the safety back on my gun, forcing myself to remember how the recoil felt so I didn't need a refresher for a while. It went like that until we came across a sign in Agassiz that said the Pacific Agri-Food Research Center was here. It had a very official-looking sign on it with the Canadian flag and the name of the center in English and French. I found it odd that it wasn't hidden in the woods or something, and that the building itself was only down a short path. It only had a stop sign, no place for a guard to watch from, to ward off trespassers. Maybe they trusted their people. The Cullens decided they would look through the building quickly, see if they could garner any useful information in terms of farming. They sped off, disappearing, leaving us in the entrance. Even though no one was here or even in the town to arrest us, it still felt like we shouldn't be here. The array of brightly colored flowers lining the path seemed out of place. I dug out some of the each color, roots and all, to busy myself until the Cullens came back. The reports they found were very detailed, so they now had an idea of how to plant the seeds we found in Abbotsford and grow it. We got back on the road and had collected another tank full of gas by the time we made it to Hope. We immediately began searching for a grocery store. Edward was pretty forceful about it. We found one with a liquor store and 2 gas stations nearby, and split up to collect what we could, our car parked amid the cars left behind. While Edward and Emmett and Rosalie dealt with the unit, I went to grab any food we could use. This place carried produce and meat from local farms which were rotted and gave off a terrible smell and attracted many flies. It also had an organic aisle, and I picked up the bags and jars of nuts and trail mixes which would be good if we ran out of canned food. I don't remember ever learning about nutrition in school, but I figured nuts were healthy and the high-calorie content was a good thing. I wandered through the aisles, stopping to read the nutrition facts of things I never bought or noticed before, and picked up a basket from the floor when my arms got full. It was quiet, so I couldn't help but be quiet too, to sort of pay respect to the place. I ignored the bags of beans and Uncle Ben rice boxes because they required water we couldn't spare. I made it to the cereal aisle and reached for a box of Fruit Loops with a smile on my face. A hand appeared and I took my hand back, freezing in place. Through the shelves I saw a girl about my age with brown gold hair staring at me with the same shock. She recovered before I did, snatched the box and ran off with loud steps. I started to run after her but stopped halfway down the aisle she disappeared from. "What do I do?" I ran back to the side of the store where the Cullens had gone as fast as I could with the basket in my arms. Edward, there's someone here. A girl, I saw a girl. I huffed. Without a word, the three gave up what they were doing and started to run out of the store. A girl like that wouldn't be on her own and the others were away. We ran out of the entrance unprepared for what might happen. None of us were excited to see humans again. A bigger, badder, black truck was parked in the entrance. Its occupants stood on the truck bed wearing thin fabric, clothes everyone had, not the hiking clothing we wore. I looked at the girl I saw as soon as I found her among them. Were they bad people? I seemed to ask with my stare. We weren't the ones to break the tense silence. Hello, a man said. Are you alone? I stepped closer to our group. Rosalie was the one nearby, and we all looked at Edward. He was the default leader because of his ability to read minds. No, we're a large group as well. Are you survivors of the town? Edward asked. For the most part. You don't look from around here. We're from America actually. We're just passing through. I see. The rest of our group then came, led by Carlyle. These are the others, my parents, siblings and friends. Edward saw Ed. He must have dubbed them harmless. The other group jumped out of their vehicle and came to shake hands. I'm Travis. We were a group of strangers but now we're friends. Christian, David, Roger, Kelly Ann and Jordan. The girl I saw, now I know as Jordan, and smiled slightly as we shook hands. Are you all on foot? Travis asked incredulously. No, we have our own truck. One of our own is sitting out there because of a bullet wound. Ah, sorry about that. He's still alive and kicking. That's good to hear. What do you say to sharing the spoils? That's why we're here, right? Travis said to us. Right, Carlyle said. To be honest, I kind of wanted to sit on our pile like a hen protecting its babies. I wager you haven't had a proper meal in a while either. You can follow us to our camp, eat, rest. Travis trailed off. We have bacon and electricity. David added. I could sense that we were unsure of going with them, but bacon sounded good. I was tingling with anticipation of a warm meal, of cooked food. Edward and Carlyle shared a quick look before Carlyle spoke. I don't see why not, if it's truly all right. Course it is. Let's go. We'll meet you back there, Carlyle said, pointing to the sign at the back of the parking lot. Travis nodded and his group hopped back onto their truck. Canadians really are nice, Eric said. Some laughed but I didn't. We pulled out of where we parked and met them at the sign. They led us through the very small town, almost 10 blocks across, to their camp. There weren't any fences or barriers along the roads that went around the town. It was simply the road and tall trees standing where the tar stopped. The trees nearly blocked your view of the river the town was surrounded by. We went off the road onto a dirt path that went into the woods and came to a stop in front of a little blue house. It had a wide porch that went around the building, making it seem like the house was mostly exposed and not really a house. The engines cut off and others began appearing from the surrounding trees in the house. Hey, Travis hollered as everyone got out of the cars. The new people didn't hesitate to come to us and the first to greet us a middle-aged man with a mustache. Welcome, I'm Luke, he said, and shook Carlyle's hand. We introduced ourselves quickly again and the group we followed here introduced us to the new people. The woman called Kelly Ann had a teenaged son named Liam who looked worse for wear for someone his age. A couple of darker-skinned people, who were wearing gardening gloves, called themselves Eli and Mia. And lastly, was a positive Olivia who jumped off of the porch and ran to us. She reminded me so much of Emily that it hurt. As for Jordan, apparently she was alone here, but I could tell she was a strong person. We're glad to have you, Luke said. We're very grateful, Carlyle responded. However, we don't want to be a burden. You're not. What's ours is yours. I think his large smile was permanent. That's very kind of you. If I may, I'm curious about how you were able to have electricity out here. That's easy. I'm an engineer. The Cullens seemed to relax a bit more but I didn't understand why. Then perhaps you can help us. We acquired a unit but we have no power source. We do have a car engine but none of us know how to create a generator. It's very important to us that this unit up and running soon. I see, Luke said gravely. I'd be happy to help. Thank you so much. We're willing to barter for your service. I have no problem doing it for nothing, but if you insist, let's go to the house and we'll talk more. We hesitated a little, not wanting to leave our things behind. Don't worry, we won't steal anything, Luke assured us. Carlyle apologized and we followed Luke into the house where Olivia had cold brewed tea waiting for us, which was nice. I couldn't help but poke at the ice cubes in it. Esme asked for a cup full and left at human speed. All I would dare ask for is what you can give without hurting yourselves. Luke started. We have winter clothing which may prove useful. We might be able to give some of our food supplies to fill in what you're missing. We can give you some of our medical supplies in the case of future injuries. We do fine in terms of food, so clothing and medical supplies will be great. We also have alcohol, including high-proof vodka that can be used as an antiseptic. Nikki said, I think we'll do without. Anything recreational like beer would be nice, but none of us want future problems. Luke said. I caught his drift. All right, so you'll stay for dinner then, which is nice. We don't see many people around these parts. Luke said. We also have showers that you're welcome to use, Olivia said. Yes, please. Most of us chorused. With the talk over, Olivia showed us to the showers and how to turn them on. Their lives here seemed so normal and comfortable. Maybe a semblance of normalcy was possible after all. We walked back outside to unload our things and complete the barter. The load on their truck was already brought into the house. The items both groups were willing to part with were laid out on the living room floor on a tarp. Their group pointed out what they needed and wanted. Not everyone was there though. Liam wasn't. His mom picked a thick pullover, a pair of pants and 2 shirts for him. Lastly, we handed over some canned food in thanks for the home-cooked meal. The showers didn't have stalls here, which made sense I supposed. The showers in indoor pools I've been to didn't have stalls either. I wasn't okay with it, so I decided to wait until the boys were done before taking my turn. I waited in the room we were given to rest in, that Nikki and I moved Brent into. I knew Nikki was his nurse. She was redressing his wound now, but seeing him jokingly say something and her slap his chest despite the fact he was injured made me think they would make a good couple. The skills they possessed made them fighters, albeit in 2 different categories. The shower was cold, but you can't be picky. My hair was stringy from the natural oils matting it. I dried myself off with a towel Olivia provided and quickly changed into a fresh set of clothes and huddled into a blanket until I warmed up again. I found out the Cullens were happy to find Luke was an engineer because he could build the generator that would keep the blood we found alive. Esme asked for the ice to keep the blood bags cold where she moved it to. I was glad the Cullens were making the sacrifice to keep themselves going. Without them we'd be nothing. Lost. These people may have been doing all right up until now, but I knew I would die at some point if there wasn't someone faster than me who had my back. The boys and I decided to go into the woods to practice with our throwing knives, and I brought my bow. As we crossed the clearing, Liam was emerging from the woods. We were staring at him, but he never looked up and just briskly walked back to the house. We just shrugged and continued. The boys at first half-heartedly threw the knives and they ricochet off of the bark, but after many tries they began making cuts. They just didn't penetrate deep enough. I had better luck with what I picked. It helped that I could see the trajectory better as opposed to the gun where I had to aim and hope it struck where I wanted it to. The scope that I could attach to it would be great for faraway targets, like a sniper rifle. We did that until it was dinner time, and it was already dark out when that time rolled around. With a small bonfire giving us light, we ate from our laps and sat in a circle around it. The blood bank already had its power source and was sitting in the truck, covered in a blanket to keep any of its blue light from showing. We've all showered and changed, and the crispy bacon and rice felt amazing in our bodies. We made small talk with Luke's group but never came close to anything serious. However, the mood quickly lightened again when we started playing games together. When the Cullens noticed we've been here for too many hours, they got up and began to say their goodbyes and thank yous. The rest of us followed suit, reluctantly, but Luke convinced us to stay the night. It's pitch black out, and I'm certain it will do your bodies and minds good to sleep in an actual bed considering what you must have gone through to make this far. I don't think it was because of those reasons the Cullens said we would stay. We were having fun, for the first time in a long time. Our group slept in the one room given to us on the bunks this camp provided when it used to be in business. We didn't have PJs, so we stripped until we were comfortable enough to sleep. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of footsteps slapping against the wood of the porch. The sky was just beginning to lighten in color, so it was early in the morning. From where I sat up, I had a view of Liam running into the forest, fully clothed with a bundle under his arm. He was gone earlier yesterday and no one was freaking out, so I laid back down hoping to get back to sleep and not miss out on an extra hour. After I awakened, the sun became up and shining brightly. We packed up Speedy and were equipped to head, but I observed Liam still wasn't here. My coronary heart began to conquer quicker. I feared that he went too far and became bitten or died a few different manner. I ran to discover his mom, and found her leaving the residence. "Excuse me, I used to be thinking in case you've visible Liam this morning. Due to the fact I noticed him leaving remaining night and I do not see him round." She sighed and smiled gently. "He does that. Liam is suffering along with his dependency to drugs. This is how he has been coping, I think." "Thanks for telling me," she was saying, putting a hand on my arm, but turned into interrupted by Liam, who becomes screaming and running out of the timber. "Mommy, Liam, Mom, I am sorry, I fucked up." He sobbed. What are you speaking about? All right, all people the front and center or we'll begin knocking you down." A booming voice said. A collection of 5 guys, protecting what looked like Navy-grade guns, emerged from the trees, spaced out like they were cornering us. The only who spoke changed into preserving a semi-automatic up. It was massive. Luke and Olivia got here from out of the residence and walked to us slowly. "Now, sincerely we are able to come to an settlement." Luke became trying to stay calm, however his voice wavered. I asked the questions. The man said, pointing the gun at Luke. Everyone gasped, and Luke and Olivia held their fingers up. "What did you do?" Travis growled at Liam. Liam simply sobbed in his mom's arms. Like a canine, the boy fetched what we wanted in trade for a treat. And every time we would ask for extra. After final night we knew there was more to have. Semi-automobile responded with a smile. My belly dropped. "Looks as if we scored pleasant. Pretty meat," a blonde one stated via his Joker-like grin. "Yeah," another almost moaned. They checked out me, Jordan, Alice and Rosalie like we had been something to eat. Emmett and Jasper got here nearer and pulled their extensive different to their aspects. My hand found Edward's. The Joker cackled, rocking to and fro on his heels, his finger on the cause of a colossal searching rifle. None of them ought to have guns of any type. My frame went cold after I found out they had take ours and we'd be defenseless. I shifted slightly and fingered the garter that held a searching knife before identifying to stuff it down the return of my pants and the garter into my pocket. "How lots of you there?" Semi-car stated. 11. Luke replied. All of them craned their necks to remember us all. "Max, pat the men down. Johnny boy, the ladies. Dyke, take a look at the region." Semi-automobile ordered. Max become the only who nearly moaned while agreed with Joker. He changed into extraordinarily muscular. The T-blouse he wore stretched throughout his body, defining his page C, and how tough his abs must be. Edward squeezed my hand before shifting to the proper. Even if the Cullens desired to do something, they could not with the guns and amount of people there had been. Joker, or Johnny boy, put on the sling of him gun and jogged to us with a slight hop to his step. They patted us down tough from our ankles to our chest. While Joker were given to me, I noticed just how a great deal he became playing himself. "I will be gentle," he said through his grin. He more gripped than patted my legs and worked his manner up while I stood stiffly with my hands in tight fists. I used to be by no means touched like this. Oh my God, make it prevent. I screamed in my head. He squeezed my ass and gripped my hips. Properly, nicely. "What have we here?" He pulled the knife out, the naked blade making a long scratch. I gasped. "I'll make you make that sound once more." He swore as he patted my torso. He winked at me and walked lower back to Semi-car's flank. "There may be plenty. We're gone, have to come return for it." Dyke said to Semi-vehicle. "Okay. Follow Skrelly," Semi-car stated to us, and gestured together with his gun to a buff guy in a tank top. We hesitated, however moved when Joker yelled a loud, extraordinary sound at us, making us jump. We began taking walks and Joker, Max, Dyke, and Semi-auto fell into function at our facets and the returned. What is happening now reminded me a lot of what we just escaped from that head jerked back sometimes. Edward's trick from then would not paintings this time. We walked and walked for what appeared like 40 minutes. My belly had lengthy stopped grumbling and in its stead became a headache that made me sense dumbed down. Judging from the mild pain of my calves, we had been strolling for nearly a mile deep into the forest. You may hardly inform we were at their camp due to the fact their green tents were not seen via the branches and shrubs. They appeared nomadic, perhaps strolling or had an automobile hidden somewhere. Without delay we had been separated and driven towards opposite sides of the camp. Semi-automobile pulled Liam out of the bunch. Now you can join us, kid. What do you are saying? Semi-auto said, slapping Liam hard on the again. And no, I do not need to. He cried, pushing far away from him. Too horrific. He fireplace multiple rounds at him. No, Kelly. His mother ran to him and whilst Liam's frame fell, the alternative shots fired went into her. Anne. I stared horrified, hearing not anything however ringing in my ears. Their brilliant red blood saturated their shirts in seconds. Woo, Joker howled. No person move or you are all subsequent. Semi-automobile yelled. The Cullens had their hands protecting their mouths and noses, not unlike the relaxation of us who were in shock. Haven't they killed a human yet? Max grumbled. They endured to push us and used a bungee wire to strap the women to a tree which was worse than rope as it became stretched, cutting into our abdomens, making the nausea worse. Max, Dyke, Skrelly, follow me return to move the loot. The earlier we do it, the earlier we can rejoice, Semi-vehicle stated. I wasn't looking forward to locating out what the birthday celebration entailed. They took their time shifting the entirety right here, pulling a tarp with our things pile on it with the aid of the cuts on the edges. It took a few journeys, numerous hours to move all of it to the camp. Olivia had stopped crying by then, and Jordan become nonetheless keeping up. Esme although, become with the others. We are set, Joker cried. We are set okay. Skrelly said looking towards us. He barely showed emotion so it turned into hard to judge what degree of loopy for us. But if a human ought to snap every other in one too like an enamel pick out, he ought to. Later, Semi-car said, and started out commencing the bundles we had packed whilst we had been going to move out. No matter having extra than sufficient to ultimate them a month effortlessly, they failed to waste any meals while establishing cans for a quick meal as they looked via our things and talked about taking on the engineers group's camp. Now not like that they had genuinely get to keep all of it. We would get our things back, and get to denail. If we made it past what we have, we're going to make it past this. However, seeing them eat turned into torture. I squeezed my eyes shut, and willed myself not to lose to my body's hunger. Would you girls care for some? Semi-vehicle stated. I stared with my eyes casted downwards. I heard him step to wherein we had been, the grass blades crunched under him. He looked to both aspect of me. Jordan turned into on my proper and Alice on my left earlier than selecting me. A spoon complete of cold, canned beans regarded in my sight. I seemed up to look his smirk and looked backpedal, debating whether or not I should oblige. I didn't want my mouth in which his has been. I'd alternatively starve. However, if I did not, I might offend him and someone ought to die. I captured it into my mouth and regarded up, then slowly pulled far from his stare. Appropriate lady. I swallowed difficult. With their starvation relatively happy, and inventory taken, they began preparing the dinner for their celebration. You are gonna love this, ladies. They talked to us like that from time to time. I used to be amazed to see them warming things up over their fire. I idea they had been uncivilized. When dinner become nearly performed, Joker and Max got here, with masses of crimson cloth of their clutches, to untie us. Proper ladies need to be dressed nicely proper, Joker said along with his deranged smile. Reputedly those crimson loads had been attire, one for each of us. Hurry up and get modified, Max stated, sounding as if he had been about to burst. Here, I requested. Yeah, Joker answered. Proper women do not undress in the front of fellows, I stated with a bashful satisfactory in my voice. This is ideal sufficient, Joker said significantly. We're going to just at the back of the one's trees. We be on your view the complete time. MMRGH fine. Pass. He stated. Let's move, I said to them, and guided Jordan and Olivia in front of me. Jordan's dress had a tight bodice with a complete, tulle skirt while Rosalie and Olivia have been given lengthy, shape-fitting dresses with a plunging neckline. Rosalie's adequate chest confused the strips that were tied in knot in the back of her neck. Alice's and mine were quick and had spaghetti straps, but hers had a layered chiffon skirt and mine turned into like a slip with a slit on the aspect. "Hurry it up," Joker yelled. "We are coming," we completed. I yelled lower back. "Now what can we do?" Rosalie growled. "I only see quite a few hearth, now not virtually what occurs." Alice stated. "Just be quick in your fort, we'll parent something out." I informed Olivia and Jordan, and stepped out of the timber with Alice and Rosalie in front. Crates and boxes were arranged into a table and we were dispersed between the men. I sat between Semi-Auto and Joker, Jordan sat between Joker and Max, Alice was between Max and Scroll, and after Scroll was Dyke, then Rosalie, and back to Semi-Auto. Dinner was baked beans, Vienna sausages and canned corn with cups of wine, but they had cloth napkins like this was a special occasion. My mind quickly put all of the clues together and I feared what could happen. They were too close, and my nearest weapon was my fork. "What's the occasion?" Rosalie asked, a little too calmly. "To celebrate you ladies. Tonight is going to be a great night," Semi-Auto said with a grin, raising a glass. "You shouldn't have," Rosalie responded. The other men raised their glasses while the rest of us didn't. Perhaps hope wasn't lost with Rosalie and Alice so close. I just had to make sure Jordan and I were out of the way. Knowing the others, they were working on getting themselves out of their binds, or however they've been left, with all them distracted. We should distract them for a few minutes longer. "The food looks good," I said, moving my fork from the left side of the paper plate to my right hand. Semi-Auto smiled at me and I smiled back. He and Joker were good fighters, my best bet was to not be near them but still have my fork in case of anything. "You'll love the sausages later," he said. Joker cackled. "So, how long have you guys been out here?" "A while. I've been homeless for a long time before this happened. I had zero intention of dying so when the time came, I got what I needed." Joker started cackling, some of the chewed food spilled out. "We're doing all right, but men are different from women. We need more than food to keep going." Semi-Auto started. "Women can be cold-hearted bitches." "Not anymore." He grabbed my wrist and squeezed. It took everything I had not to pull my hand away. "Now you're vulnerable. You need protection and food, and we need you." He leaned in closer for extra effect, as if his glaring eyes weren't enough. I forgot for a moment what the plan was, until I saw a glimmer of hope. "Edward." I jammed my fork into the back of his hand and ran around to grab Jordan's hand. "Come on, let's go." With sunlight glinting off their skin, they ran through us and pulled the crew away. "Start running, that way," Jordan yelled. "No, we can't leave Kelly Ann here, not like this." Olivia blubbered. I looked behind me and the biggest of the men were trying to get the upper hand by grabbing their guns. The Cullens pulled them away and snapped their necks. It sounded like a chicken bone being snapped in half, but many times louder. "What the fuck?" I turned around and saw Travis with a horrified look on his face as he stepped back. The rest of the people from the Hope camp were coming closer. By then the Cullens were finished, however they didn't stop to acknowledge them. "We're not alone, vampires are coming," Alice told them. Luke was going to repeat. "How many?" Jasper asked, stepping in front of her. "4, one female." Edward ran to me, and Olivia jumped back. Jacob and Quill shape-shifted and the Hope camp then couldn't accept us anymore. "No freakin' way," David breathed. Olivia ran and hid behind the Jordan. "Come here," Roger yelled. More indecisive than scared, she did what she was told. "Move, move, move. Let's the hell out of here," Christian yelled. They didn't have to be told twice. "No, you don't understand, there are other vampires coming here," Edward urged. Kelly Ann and her son's blood must have attracted them, Carlyle deduced. "They're here," Alice screamed. The rustling of the leaves in the trees were then loud enough for me to hear. "Go, go, go." Christian continued to rush. Luke, Eli, Mia, Olivia, and Jordan were pulled into the forest and forced to a sprint. "Jordan, no, let's go after them," Edward shouted. He pointed to Rosalie and Emmett while the rest of the Cullens started running. Jacob bounded to me and pulled myself onto his back behind Eric. Two people was dangerously close to too much weight for them, but Jacob and Quill pushed themselves to run ahead of the Cullens. The others were in our sights, but the wolves skidded to stop when 4 people fell and landed in a crouch in front of us. When I could finally look, I saw it wasn't the Cullens. They all had bright red eyes, the female had dusty rose-colored hair, and the leader was in the middle. All looked to be in their 20s. "Sorry to crash your hunt. Losers weepers," the leader said. At that they ran in the direction the humans went, their laughter echoing in the trees. "Hurry," Edward shouted, and led us. "This isn't our fight, we shouldn't get involved unnecessarily." Rosalie yelled, "Are you going to join them then?" I screamed at her. "That's not what I mean." She growled, "You might as well join them if you aren't going to stop them." "Faster," I told Jacob. After seeing Kelly Ann and Liam's deaths, I wanted to save them, at least those who weren't afraid of us. Just someone. From what could see, the traditional vampires were weaving around the humans, hissing and scaring them. Whenever they tried to run away, they were blocked. The Cullens tried to pluck them away, but they barely fought. It was hard to see where the Camp Hope members were, they were spread out. We kept running after them, the wolves running off to the side, out of the way. We were barely gaining on them, they were so fast. Then suddenly Jacob and Quill started winning and huffing through their nose, shaking their entire bodies. "Whoa, what's wrong? Jacob, stop, stop, stop." I heard Edward yell, "There aren't alone." "Woo," the leader screamed. "Game's over. Feasting time." Something grabbed me from behind and I barely had time to scream before the forest floor and Jacob was far from me. I grasped the arm that had me tightly. One of the male vampires had me beneath his arm as he ran through the trees, jumping from branch to department. I may want to hear others' screams that were soon cut off. This vampire chuckled beneath his breath as he jumped down right into a clearing. I was dropped and immediately observed the inflamed vampire in a cage, and so did the others. "Hi there, how's it going, Liam? You have been maintaining down the fort for us proper," the chief said, as if this person were nonetheless here. It jiggled the bars, baring his fangs. "I realize you have. We introduced you some new pals," he continued. "Maybe we need to drop one among them stinkin' vegetarians, see what happens for ourselves," another male advised. "Seems like an amazing idea," the chief said with a chuckle. "Are we able to please maintain the dogs? We will have them changed," the purple-haired woman stated. "Even better. One of theirs had been inflamed, and they stored him." "Why not all 3? One stated, and grabbed Jordan by her hair. She cried out in ache and kicked at him. "Feisty. I love it. Maybe I'll have you for dinner as an alternative." Later Logan. "We've got opposition to do away with," the chief said. "We're not your competition," Carlyle said. "Can't you spot he is dead?" Jacob yelled. "He is simply hungry, however now not for long," he shouted, and the 3 of them charged on the Cullens. With human blood coursing via their veins, they have been a bit faster and more potent. I saw the chief seize Carlyle in a headlock and screamed. A mild gray crack regarded in his cheek before he were given out of it, and pulled his fingers off. Emmett got here from in the back of and tore his head off. Meanwhile Jasper became trying to capture one that bobbed and weaved. Edward turned into busy subduing the remaining male and handiest girl of the organization with Alice, Rosalie, and Esme's help. In the end, they had been a pile of limbs on hearth, such as the infected one, setting him out of his distress. Earlier than killing him, Carlyle tried to talk to it, his first danger of doing as a way to an infected vampire, but it didn't respond. Or confirmed any sign of remembering who or what he turned into. He became simply hungry, achieving through the thick, metallic bars for one folks. I didn't at all experience horrific for them. I felt relieved. At some point they would have become infected too. The other have to have gotten inflamed because they were not careful of who they fed off of. However, I worried for Edward. I regarded up, and through the smoke saw him staring down on the blue flames. He has performed a lot killing. All of them have, then the relaxation people. However, if he or the others have become too thirsty and have become inflamed, how ought I keep away from that after I could not even kill one of the zombies myself? How may want I kill him, if he became infected shielding me? How ought I kill any of them? I knew I had others to defend. I might begin education now. A few feet away have been what remained from Wish Camp, a blubbering mess. Carlyle sighed. "It is safe now," He stated. We aren't your enemy. Jordan tore herself far from Olivia. No, don't, she cried. Jordan stalked toward via the overgrown grass. I want to enroll in you, she said. I breathed and positioned a hand on her knee too, then hugged her. I did not know what to mention to her. Pulling returned, I noticed Carlyle nod. Esme then pulled him in the direction of her to look his face. Jordan, come lower back, Roger yelled. Go away her, I heard someone else say. Wager no one else desired to leave Wish. Allows get the fuck out of right here. Emmett growled. We wanted to shop more survivors, deep down inner. However, after they determined out what we were, they had been simply as afraid. Perhaps this is that. They won't hurt you, I told Jordan as I boosted her up onto Jacob's lower back. I selected to trip with Edward, deriving energy from him. He seemed to too, catching up to Carlyle and strolling beside him. We quick again to the bandits' camp and picked up our property, leaving what we failed to include in the back of in case the others lower back for it, and endured to camp desire to our truck. Are you certain you need to leave? I asked Jordan. Fine, okay then. All of us climbed in and got again on the street that led immediately to Denali. Carlyle drove us as rapid because the truck should cross, causing the wind to blow through our hair. I sat leaning again, resting my head on the little wall, watching this world skip through, letting the wind tangle up my hair. The day commenced to interrupt a bit at the same time as later, and that I wasn't the most effective one that determined to stay unsleeping. Food was surpassed around and absolutely everyone was quiet for a while. What are we going to do in Denali? Eric requested. I do not really know. Attempt to live. It was decided we might handiest stop for lavatory breaks, and some of the Cullens would glance through the buildings close by to inventory what we could, but we did not stop for that once we drove into a brand new city. The plan became to get to Denali through the following sunrise. Rosalie had attempted calling the Denalis at the manor, however there has been no service. The cell phone lines were formally down. It's been 14 days, I assume. Yeah, I think it's too late to keep this location. The bushes grew thicker, and mountains greater common. We layered on sweaters and jackets because it were given colder and less warm the closer we got. A backpack of canned goods changed into handed round twice before the sky began to darken. My anxiety increased whenever it were given a color darker. I felt safer during the day once I may want to see the whole lot. Our lights have been off to avoid drawing interest to ourselves and mix in, however the whole thing else combined in two. I felt like if I turned my flashlight on, a zombie could seem in front of me or something could abruptly happen. Are we alone? I said, my voice sounding louder than the car to me. Sure, promise. We are preserving a lookout, Edward assured me. He reached out the window to caress my face and that I leaned into his hand. So long as he changed into here, I might be exceptional. Or may want to maintain pretending. I began to marvel if any of them were. After it's been pitch black for a few hours, it became too cold to depart my fingers out of my pockets. The celebs were out this night. I hadn't seen them in a while. For a second I worried something might discover us due to the fact they have been too vivid. Soon, Edward introduced we had been crossing the border. We drove beyond this small sales space and down the dirt street till Carlyle turned onto an unmarked route. We went some miles into the Denali wooded area at a snail-like pace till there were two timber in the manor. We have to make the rest of the manor strolling, Carlyle said. Those folks within the back stretched, hopping sounds erupting all around, before jumping out. The Cullens wore a number of the jackets before taking a number of the bags out, what we should bring. We concealed the truck as great as we could with a few branches they tore off before starting the hike up the mountain. At the very top, became what might be our new domestic for some time, even supposing the Denalis were not there. But they could be, of course they could. I chanted that in my head again and again, with each step. The people required some breaks, but as light commenced to attain us via the timber, we should see the partitions. While we attain it, we walked round it until we observed the entrance and Emmett known as out loudly. Elizar, Ka Armin, Tanya, I, you sound like a pinning lover. A female voice said. Tanya. The door cracked open from one of the edges, the entire wall making a dodecagon, and a strawberry blonde girl about my age stood there, wearing leather and fur. Tanya, Rosalie cried, and immediately pulled her into a hug. I'm so glad you're all right. I'm glad you all made it, Tanya said, hugging her tight. How are Eliezer and Carmen? Carlyle asked. We're all fine. Now come in, let's get you out of there, she said, and held the door open wider. You could see their house standing a few meters away, 2 large squares on either side of their house of just dirt that I guessed was to grow food. Everywhere else the grass was untouched, a few Alaskan wildflowers peeking out of it. Thank you. These are our friends. Carlyle introduced us all and she shook all of our hands, but lingered on me. It's so good to finally meet you, she said to me and pulled me into a hug. I heard so much about you. Too bad we couldn't meet under better circumstances. Edward put a hand on my shoulder. Good to see you too, Edward. Come, the others are in the house. She led way, down the path of grass between the gardens to the house. When we got closer to the house, 4 others came out of the front door and waited for us. It turned out to be Eliezer and Carmen, the mother and father of the family, like how Carlyle and Esme was to ours, and Tanya's sisters Irina and Kate wearing fur jackets. They ushered us in when they saw Brent and quickly accommodated him in the living room. Inside the stone brick house, above the spacious living room, were wooden beams that stretched across the ceiling to the other side of the room where there was a large fireplace. Hanging off the wall, a flat-screen TV that would remain out of use until the zombie problem was fixed. This house was what I imagined a lodge looked like, and I was sure it was insulated so we would bear the rest of the winter just fine. We've prepared rooms for you all, but catch your breaths here, Carmen told us. Like Esme, there was a warm, motherly tone to her voice. We shed all of our weight as Carmen and Kate disappeared and reappeared with mugs of tea. You must be so very tired, Carmen said as she handed out the cups. I had noticed she and Eliezer had a slight accent. Interesting, they settled here from other parts of the world. How is Alaska? Edward asked. It's quieter in the mountains, but we were able to build walls around some animals. As for the people in town in hiding, I suppose we haven't seen any of them when we went there to collect food, or many zombies. Eliezer answered. Most likely they crossed the border from Canada, but it won't be long before the virus adapts to the cold weather, Nikki said, taking her mug. Still, let's have hope, Carmen said, but she didn't sound so hopeful herself. The electricity lines went down a few days ago. We couldn't reach you, so we could only hope you were okay. I'm glad we were right, Kate said. We did our best with the walls. We're hoping it can be a permanent crisis house, Eliezer said. We aren't experts, but we'll make sure it is, Jasper responded. Everyone was silent for a moment, and I couldn't help but think they wanted to know more about what we had faced, talk more about our situation, but didn't know how to ask. We'll take it day by day, Eliezer finally said, and grabbed his mate's hand. We talked a little more about ourselves so they got to know the rest of us, and they told us a bit about themselves and how they came to live together. I never once thought about how maybe some humans grew up to be scared of monsters in general, but the ones we attracted, Nikki, Brent, Eric, and Jordan, accepted it as if vampires and werewolves were as natural as humans were. After that, we were shown to our rooms. There were 5 in total, 4 of which were used by them and the last was a guest bedroom, but the 3 sisters moved into one room so we had space. All the girls of our group shared one room, while the males were split between 2 rooms. Carmen noted out loud that perhaps the house should be extended so we weren't so squished in. Over time this place would become home. I breathed out, a cloud of warmth vanishing into the cold air. It was June, supposedly summer, but it was only 47 degrees Fahrenheit. The trees, though, were as green as ever and snow no longer covered the ground. I sat atop a roof in the residential area of Nenana. Supposedly a city, population 376, at least it was. It was quite a ways away from Denali. The many mountains and rivers there were between cities worked to our advantage, but the distance and the many airports because of the distances did not. The number of airports, 1 in every city I bet, was a very big con. But the rivers were clean and the fish safe to eat, and this season the vegetables in our garden would be ready to be picked. So the humans were fine. Funny, us humans had sort of became vegetarians like the Cullens and Denalis. The Denalis and Cullens were doing fine too. They sucked the blood out of the fish, maximizing our food source, and carefully fed off of the animals the Denalis successfully trapped. We had to keep them alive. We had a system to prevent one animal from being fed on too many times, and there would be a probation period for that animal before blood can be derived from it. We've also found a way to keep things cool without the use of refrigerators, by burying bins inside the ice-cold soil. And keep warm by burning chunks of wood in the fireplace. Feeding the animals, tending the garden, and chopping wood were few of the responsibilities we had. Waking up early to do that became routine in the 2 months we've been here. The average temperature for Alaska was still cold, however, our fur coats kept us warm. A few other responsibilities were collecting food, either canned goods from the seemingly abandoned cities or gathering edible plants and nuts from the forest. That's why we've come so far from Denali. We've already completely cleared out the nearest cities. I slid down the roof, and hung off the edge for a second before jumping down. Down the driveway was Edward, waiting for me. "Clear," I said, as I walked towards him. He nodded. We quietly moved on to the next block, hand in hand. These trips were usually done in silence, our process of going through the entire place routine. And, sure, I've thought of becoming a vampire. It might make things easier, but we didn't have many animals either. At some point, perhaps, the Cullens and Denalis would have to feed on us. Then, Jacob and Quill would have something to fight about, but I didn't want that to happen. Since coming to Alaska though, I've become angry. I had gotten over the shock, sadness, and grief. And I trained myself every single day, in using my bow, an axe, guns, and in hand-to-hand combat. If I ever came face to face with a zombie again, or a human who posed a threat, I would not hesitate. The others seemed to overcome their damage as well. We held our funeral for our families lost a few days after arriving, replanting Alaskan wildflowers to pose as their graves. Though we still missed them and remembered our simpler days that included them, we've been healing, having more of those simpler days with each other. We quickly combed through the town, meeting up with Nikki, Jordan, Jacob and Quill, filling a couple of backpacks with goods, and a few jugs of gasoline from the 2 gas stations here, and Edward had drawn a flawless map of the place in case we needed it. Over time we had found ways to use everything we found and developed an eye for things possibly useful. Now we can head back home in our truck, which we've since modified to bear more weight and mow down hordes of zombies. There were larger tires on it, elevating the body, and a grate in the front, a cage along the perimeter of the truck bed, and spikes all over. Some elements found in hunting trucks were also added so our vehicle could be a safe island amidst a horde. The rest of our family welcomed us home by helping us unload and put away our findings. "Missed me," Nikki teased Brent, who limped towards her. "Always. And there was always warm drinks and baths waiting for us when we got back." "Bella and I are going to take our bath outside this time," Edward let everyone know. There was a chorus of oohs. I didn't shy away, but my cheeks still flushed red. Not that long ago we had discovered a natural hot spring that we now used regularly as an activity to unwind and relax our muscles. Edward used his speed to shed his clothes and get in time to watch me undress. I stepped on the stones we laid on top of the soil with bare feet and started stripping down until I was naked, all the while smirking at him. He could be such a boy sometimes. As soon as I was inside, I nestled myself in his arms, the coldness of his body no longer a problem. He smiled down at me, brushing my hair upwards with his free hand, causing a shiver of pleasure to run down my spine. In every free moment we were together and all over each other. I didn't flinch but merely opened my eyes, staring up at the blue-gray sky when he nibbled his way up my chest to the side of my neck. "Marry me," he said in a low voice at my ear. "What?" He lifted his head. "I'll change you, one day or right now, whenever you're ready. But for now, marry me." I searched his eyes, but there was nothing that told me this was a merely sudden gesture. I've always known I didn't want to live without you. I only started to live when I met you. When I was away I thought of you every day, wondering if I had made the right decision, mourning the time I spent with you. I still think to myself that I was stupid for doing that. Lately I've been thinking about losing you, and I can't bear the thought of living in this world without you. I wouldn't survive. I gritted my teeth, willing the lump in my throat away, but the waterworks had already started. His arms tightened around me. "I'll make sure we have all the time in the world. I won't lose you, and you won't lose me. Please marry me." I pulled his face down and cried into his neck. "That's all I ever wanted." I squeaked out. "When the time is right, I'll ask you to." I don't want a struggling. He nodded, and we stayed embraced, our faces in each other's neck. Lifestyles after an apocalypse, the worrying element at least, was fairly smooth. Our chores took maximum of the day and we spent the relaxation of our time playing board games or gambling out of doors together. It did get dull frequently enough, and in that silence I questioned approximately the out-of-doors international. All we knew became that it was quiet, but we didn't realize approximately the state of other nations or if any one of them were already making efforts to smooth up the catastrophe. Or if none of them had been. Although our clan had made a residing here, it wasn't ordinary to us. We were just now not at the run anymore. And our camp wasn't an everlasting restoration just like the life we used to live that appeared to don't have any cease. I would like to head again to a world like that. I needed to, or I wouldn't be able to stay on with Edward as a vampire. Sincerely, a country became able to stay intact and Feature started out looking into restoring the world. The others were thinking about this too. We figured we might want an army-grade radio to attempt to touch a person from another United States of America, but we had no concept in which to find an military base. So we determined to hold combing through Alaska until we came across one. Alaska was, in the end, a part of the US and we had been Canada's associates, so there should be a manner to speak with nearby countries. We made our way up the street to Fairbanks, certainly one of the most important towns. Because of that, we had almost anybody on deck even as the Denali's stayed in the back of to protect our camp and do a habitual test of the wooded area surrounding it. As always, there has been a piece of an open space of overgrown grass main into the town, and I scouted the area with the scope of my rifle with the others in the automobile. Riding through these open spaces become goal exercise, and right here the open area changed into 4 instances as large because the soccer area at Forks Excessive School. I've got one, Bells, Eric said with a smile. A pop rang inside the silence. No, I got one. I laughed. He wasn't upset. He regained his cognizance and shot any other down. Edward persevered using down the road, and zombies became more frequent. We usually came across one every few miles and whoever got it changed into the winner. However, now the variety turned into near double. We all observed and the game turned into over. We would shop our bullets in case we bumped into hassle later on. Edward needed to power manner past the welcoming sign to get to the closest intersection. There we unloaded, and this time's watchers grabbed their semi-computerized rifles. We didn't have many, so someone in our corporations of 3 had one among 3 semis for horde emergencies. Eric and Emmett needed to live with the truck, so Edward and that I were on our very own. I already had my handgun strapped to my thigh and a hunting knife hidden in my boot, so I grabbed a protracted range walkie-talkie to relay records to the alternative agencies. When we found them, some days in the past, they straight away became a part of our gear. I adjusted my knitted hat and headband before leaping out of our truck, semi on my lower back and a looking rifle in hand. With every person out and geared up, Eric and Emmett drove off at the equal street to scout the roads out before locating a place to hide the truck and stake out. And we split up. Edward and I'd discover the purpose of the important open area we handed at the same time as the others combed through the southern sectors. We jogged lower back up the road, automatically looking in all instructions for any activity, and throughout the large discipline of overgrown grass. Quickly we made it to the opposite facet and observed a botanical lawn that changed into now a cemetery of local and brought plants. In the back of it turned into the Worldwide Arctic Studies Center. Underneath the name of the building on the sign, it said, of the University of Fairbanks. It's a university campus. I stated out loud, which means there is dorms. Edward sighed. We looked around us, watching for to see human beings scurrying throughout the sector. There has been no one in all course. However, I constant my grip on my gun and we continued down the road the constructing turned into on. We surpassed different homes that were a part of the campus earlier than attending to the main constructing. Looping around we observed the leisure center, then the dorm. We failed to find any litter outside, but we figured it'd have been purposefully stored easy. Rounding the gray constructing changed into any other find it irresistible with a large window exposing the stairs in the center and windows on either facet. There had been 10 windows on each of the 5 flooring, perhaps 50 rooms in all. At the least 50 individuals should live in there. Edward signaled to me along with his fingers that we would check it out and input from the returned. I nodded, and ran at the back of him while he gave the pass. The hallway became pretty messy, however there was no blood. We walked to the front, locating the primary floor became made up of services like a gym, and checked the front door. It was open. The take a look at it became smooth. We found the stairs on this aspect of the building and started searching through the bedrooms. The dorms were like residences. Each had 5 bedrooms, a residing room, kitchen and 1 lavatory. In each bedroom have been unmade beds, complete closets and cluttered desks. All the assets were still here. It seemed like a superb vicinity for survivors to cover out. We found the airport down right here. The radio chirped. Reproduction that. Edward responded. Maybe anyone became evacuated and flown out. He surmised. Yeah, maybe, I said. We finished there and moved directly to the subsequent constructing, finding it in a comparable situation. We exited and continued throughout the campus with Edward relaying what we found. We observed a university campus up right here. We're headed to the following location. Geist Avenue still seen. It had reduced straight through the metropolis. You guys maintain searching for your facet and we'll leave through here. He stated into the receiver. Geist showed. Emmett said. About miles down it becomes the Johansson Freeway, which stretches 4 miles across. This facet is 2 zones thick. Rosalie stated, regarding the grid pattern most important roads made. Jasper's and Carlisle's institution will seek through the a long way south vicinity, and ours will maintain across. Let's meet in the Hamilton Acres, 4 miles left of you. Edward and Bella will must leave through Slaterville, among Johansson and the Chena River, all power around Hamilton. Emmett stated. Each institution took turns to say they understood the plan. Let's get this completed earlier than nightfall. Edward stated to them, and we jogged to the alternative facet of the campus. Once we have made it return to Geist, we headed west to the subsequent community. When I were given hungry, I scarfed down granola bars as I walked, and washed it down with water from the portable bottle I had connected to my backpack. Each backpack had one and a duffel bag internal to fill when we scavenged. Thank goodness for vampire power. Edward carried our load, no trouble. We seemed quick via Totem Park, knocking on the doorways to ensure nobody turned into there and stored as many items as we ought to, checking the expiration dates first or we would grow to be wearing useless weight. Edward known as Emmett while we had too many stuff, and Eric got here and helped us load it up on the truck bed. If we determined an excessive amount of, we might dig a hollow inside the nearest wooded area, stash our discover, and write down steps to get to it so someone may want to come returned and get it. Eric drove off to pick out up what the alternative corporations had, and we moved directly to the subsequent community. There we observed a feed shop for farm animals and I idea how excellent it might be if we had a cow or a few chickens. After a while we had to name Eric back to pick out up different matters we determined. Inside the truck bed had been nets full of cans, some boxes and a complete jug of gasoline. Not horrific, Eric stated. Maximum things had been already expired. I decided to prevent talking. No person became in factories packaging greater canned meals. When they expire, we're out. No matter in the country we went, there might be no food. That attention made me facepalm myself. Eric stored loading all of it up. I do not assume he heard me. We're strolling out of time, again. Can we actually depend totally on veggies? I did not think so. We observed the sun became going to set soon, and we pushed ourselves to work faster, skipping a few places. I had observed my tempo while Eric interrupted it. Hello. I found an airfield. His voice sounded from the radio. I fumbled to unlatch it from my backpack. A what? I said I discovered an airfield. I became to rush to Edward so he may want to listen this, however he turned into already status there behind me. Did you cross internal? Jasper requested. And no. Appropriate. Where exactly are you? We'll meet you there. There's this loop off Gaffney Avenue. I'm hiding within the bushes there. Just comply with the river. Bella and I'm able to reduce via Hamilton. Edward told them. We have not come upon humans, I am going to shift. Jacob said. I heard Carlisle approve that plan as I climbed on Edward's return. We cut through Hamilton in 15 minutes, Edward catching Emmett's scent along the manor, and discovered an avenue bridge that took us throughout the Chena River. Off it, we have been already on Gaffrey Street. We observed it, passing an airstrip, to a loop road we figured changed into the proper one. Seeing us, The truck changed into pushed out of its hiding vicinity to us, Emmett and Eric internal. In the next minute, the rest had been again, Jordan and Nikki on Jacob and Quill's back. They quick were given off and they phased. I shifted my eyes somewhere else whilst they placed their garments lower back on. It clearly become an airfield. However, it was fenced in, with barbed twine looped at the top. Does all of us realize a way to fly a plane? Jacob asked. We checked out Jasper. We used horses within the Confederacy. It became a land primarily based warfare. Our eyes moved to Edward. I do not know, he said. You lived 90 years and never had a lesson. I wasn't awaiting the apocalypse. All of us get in, Carlyle said. We shed our baggage and piled into the trunk mattress. Alice perched herself on the roof of the automobile, the size of the gun nearly swallowing her, to pick off something that tried to get close to the Cullens strolling beside us. The relaxation folks did the identical, looking our sides and lower back. We drove across the perimeter, continuing on the road we had been already on, and found the principal front open. I lifted my gun to leaf through the scope into the watchtower on either facet of the front gates. Nobody. Nikki and that I said. Perhaps they left, Eric said, sounding slightly disappointed. Move on. Edward sighed. We drove via the hole to the dark gray building that loomed a few meters away. I discovered it odd that an army base could have such a lot of home windows, and appeared to be a modern architect turned into paid to design it. The constructing was cut up into, I am assuming, to separate departments, with an unmarried big bridge connecting them and ground-to-ceiling home windows exposing the inside. We climbed out of the automobile, and Edward nudged the door open to poke his head in earlier than going inner, and we accompanied. The interior changed into gray too, and the window panes the solar shone around made a cage sample at the wall and floor. Kind of huddled, we made our manner down the corridor, seeking to maintain the slapping of our shoes at the floor to a minimum. We have been a little uneasy, however. As soon as doors appeared we began looking into them to see if any one of them become a communications room. I wandered down the hall to get to the stairs and get ahead, begin at the second ground. I wasn't consciously watching for something, however I did discover it weird that not one of the doors have been locked, seeing that they all harbored some type of sensitive facts. The small home windows they had been caged too. I tried to push my mind away and focus. After a couple of minutes, the others caught up to me and I directed them to go up from the other facet of the corridor, then went up the steps on my facet. The rooms were by and large offices and dormitories. The base became small, so I intended the entirety become filled into this building. I fast determined the bridge and went straight to it. From there, at the 0.33 floor, the view changed into awesome. The solar changed into setting and disappearing at the back of the trees, casting shadows throughout the airfield. At that I turned on my flashlight and persisted the search. A few yards in and this constructing seemed more promising to me. I made it to a restricted region that required the swipe of a card to bypass through. I felt a chilly hand on my shoulder and I jumped. Geez, Edward, you scared me. I laughed. He gave me a wry smile, however his eyes have been extreme. It is dark, don't go off on my own. Wasn't. You're just sluggish. I joked. He pinched my ass and that I swatted his hand. Locked, he stated, and jimmied the handle. Then he became it tough and driven, breaking it, inflicting a noisy pop to ring through the corridor. We started out looking through the rooms, he looking through one aspect and I the alternative. I found a room that appeared promising. There have been flat monitors hanging off of the ceiling and wall, creating a curved wall of screens, and a desk area in which computers and containers of buttons and switches created a wall around it. There have been headsets at the table, a few corded telephones, and 2 chairs with wheels sitting there with the returned rests not dealing with the desk. I pressed and flipped a number of the ON buttons and switches. Of course none might activate, there may be no power. From the corner of my eye I noticed Edward input the room. Whoa, he stated, we should find a way to get the power back on right here. An area like this will have a lower backup generator someplace in the basement. Edward turned to the walkie-talkie. Bella would possibly have found the room, but we need to repair the electricity. 1-2 of you preserve searching simply in case, and the other half is going to locate the generator. He stated, we might want gas. I advised him. He exceeded that message along. Allows find a manual or something for this. He said to me, and we commenced looking through the drawers and shelves. After I worked at Newton's that they had manuals and so forth for brand new hirees to examine. Perhaps something became saved around right here. Bella. My head snapped up and that I saw Edward point his gun on the center elderly guy within the doorway who had his palms up and gave the look of a deer in headlights who was most in all likelihood going to get run over. I picked up my gun and pointed it at the woman behind him. Whoa, am no longer a zombie, not a chance, he mumbled in a hurry. Juno, wait, he stated to a woman behind him. We are just survivors looking for the ham radio here. Seems like you determined it. The what? I stated. Ham radios can reach other international locations. We need to name Britain. He replied. I looked at Edward then returned at them. There has been extra then but he sounded like knew what he become speak me approximately. We had no idea about it. Document in. I said. Okay, however can you put down your weapons? No, Edward and I stated in unison. He allow his group in one after the other. The girl, Juno, was first then a more youthful woman, a person near the primary one's age and a more youthful male about the same age as the second one female. Those are maximum in all likelihood of their early 1920s. K. The older man stated. Are each person armed? I requested in a hard voice. Just him. The older man pointed to the alternative older male who took out a small handgun, and held his fingers out, finger obviously not at the trigger. Put it at the desk. Edward ordered, and that I readied myself. He evenly got here closer, placed it at the metal, then stepped back. I gave all of them, standing in opposition to the wall, some other once over earlier than setting down my gun. Edward, too, placed his down. Okay, I almost sighed. We've had horrific stories before. It really is all you want to realize. I said defensively. It is okay. No harm achieved. I'm Bella, I said, and held my hand out for him to shake. Noah Bethel. That is Juno Thorne, Lissa Smith, Leard Dawson, and Hayden Bettles. He delivered in order. They have been a bit hesitant except for the soldier Leard. Possibly due to the fact I used to be retaining large weapons. Edward accompanied after. You realize what this is, do you understand a way to use it? Edward requested Noah. Leard spoke up. I do. I worked in a national protection building in Canada. You wouldn't show up to realize a way to fly a plane. Edward requested. No, I do not. However there are not any planes. We checked. We got here from the alternative facet of the airfield. Must have been why we failed to run into every other earlier than. I thought out loud. Yeah, he stated. I grabbed his handgun and gave it back to him. No humorous commercial enterprise. We are focused on getting again to civilization. He said, seeming slightly offended. So are we. Then we are buddies. I said. I am happy. He answered. We are not alone both. Edward started. Part of our institution is seeking out the lower backup generator. I see. Then I bet we're going to wait right here. I nodded and pushed the chair farthest from them to them and sat at the desk as an alternative. It turned into silent for a while, whilst I fidgeted. So, Edward cleared his throat then. What other professions make up your organization? He requested conversationally. I'm a virologist, stated the primary man. Oh, I said amazed. I am an elementary faculty instructor with a heritage in psychology, said Juno. I am just a student but I have carried out a lot of camping and survival training, no longer genuinely in practice for this, the younger female said. I huffed amusing. She let loose an ungainly one. I used to be a police officer in training. I'm no longer an amazing shot though, the more youthful male said, slightly depressed. Did not meet the undead. I requested. No longer much. Not truly, no. He said. Lucky. Then little lighting fixtures above all the buttons and switches became on. I jumped off the table and stared closely at all of them. The radio chirped. Did it paintings? Eric said, sounding slightly out of breath. Sure it did, Edward replied. We are on our way. Eric stated. Permit me see, stated the soldier. He pulled a chair underneath him. I stepped lower back and let him do his thing. He flipped different switches and pressed the buttons on the keyboard speedy, bringing the pages he want up at the display screen. I couldn't understand any of the graphs or something. My coronary heart acted surprisingly as I watched him. Howdy, hiya, he stated into the receiver, and did more things, converting the channels I suppose. All of us came closer, looming over him, and when the others got returned, they did too. Ello, hey, he, hiya, The alternative person stated louder. Yes, hey, I am Leard Dawson calling from Fairbanks, Alaska. I'm a Canadian soldier of the reserve and I am now not on my own. Please help us, he said through his grin. We failed to hear something for a moment. Hello, can you pay attention me? He said, his grin gone. Yes soldier, I will listen you loud and clean. I'm glad you're alive. I should almost cry. I'm satisfied you are alive. What's the reputation? The person requested, sounding unhopeful. There may be not anything right here. He replied within the equal tone. The man on the opposite aspect sighed. We figured as plenty. You've got reached high-quality Britain. My name is George Cameron. There's a relaxed, walled base here where existence is as ordinary as was once. If you can get to Cartwright Airport in Newfoundland in 4 days, then you could be right here too. They'll wait until middle of the night for you. We're going to be there. The soldier advised them. The relaxation of erupted into cheers and hugs as if we had landed the rover on Mars. This changed into actually higher than that. All of a sudden Nikki headed closer to me together with her palms open. I started out crying and giggling and hugged her tight. While we let pass, I included my mouth with my hand. Then Edward pulled my face in the direction of him and kissed me tough over the wall of video display units. By the point we've all calmed down, the soldier become finished speak me to the person and became pulling his headphones off. We're saved. But this is on the other facet of the USA. Are we able to make it? Lissa asked. Plus, we are 6.5 hours in advance. We clearly lost that point. Juno stated. My thoughts jumped to everybody riding a vampire or werewolf. However they did not realize about them and we didn't realize how they had react. If they'd preserve it secret. It had to be kept secret inside the new international. I was about to grow to be depressed till Leard spoke once more. Then we've 3.5 days. If we drive 100 miles in line with we're going to make it with time to spare. We needed to leave at once, whilst we've made a home right here, idea. Do you've got a car? Edward asked him. No, we had been going to take one. Noah admitted. We've one, however it may not carry absolutely everyone. Edward turned to the rest of our group and gave them a mild nod. Then we'll locate one and meet you wherein yours is. Leard stated. We are now not nicely prepared to make that journey collectively both. Eric stated. Besides, Elazar and the others are again there. Rosalie inputted. There may be more. Noah asked in difficulty. For a 2D idea we ought to go on our very own while not having to cover ourselves in the event that they decided to go beforehand. We've extra components there. In case you want anything else, we are able to provide it to you. However the relaxation folks do need to return to our base. Carlyle said. Leard and Noah checked out every different and their companions. We will go with you. They determined. Carlyle nodded. Okay, Emmett and I can take Leard out of doors. You lead the rest with the others. Jasper told Edward. I passed Emmett the semi and readjusted the strap of my rifle. Okay, allows flow. Eric and Bella, north. Nikki and Jacob, south. The rest, facets. Edward delegated. Right, we chorused. Eric and that I made our manor via to the front while Edward told the others we might make our way to the front in a huddle. Then allows get going. Noah stated. Coronary heart pumping. I lead the group out into the corridor and became on the flashlight I had taped to it. Emmett, Jasper and Leard then broke off and headed to the stairs on this side even as the rest people went again the manner we came. I informed Eric I'd go keep the direction clear and jogged some yards in advance. The building format changed into like an angular U, so I had to make my manor around 2 corners. But once I were given to the second one where the bridge became, there stood an undead soldier, in camo, together with his arm and that 1/2 of his torso lacking. I flattened myself against the wall and signaled with my hand to the others to prevent and be silent. I became again slowly, finger at the cause. I'm sorry. I shot him in the head, the bang louder in this corridor than outside. I took some steps forward then froze. Walking footsteps coming from the alternative facet. I could hear it faintly. It grew louder and louder, then the horde crashed into the door, establishing it. Go, move, move. I screamed, and shot at the glass floor however it did not shatter like I was hoping. Is it fucking bulletproof? I became and ran, speedy catching up with the others. You forgot to mention you brought pals with you. I yelled, over someone else who shouted. Down, Down, down. We ran down the steps, tripping as we went, and Eric lagged to assist me keep the horde off with his semi. The bodies became hurdles, and the other zombies tripped over them, and fell down the stairs to in which we were. Eric held down the trigger and shot at them, and I persisted to shoot the others, all squatties wearing camo or other uniforms. As soon because the others were a flight of stairs down, we stopped and ran to trap up, the horde at our heels. Searching back, they could not actually run down the stairs. They took a running step of a stair, and after they picked up their different foot, they fell onto the subsequent stair. They crashed into the wall and driven themselves off, and I kept walking, leaping steps. We driven through the doorways on the lowest floor and bounded in the direction of the truck, the horde crashing through and following after us. Ahead, the engine grew to become on, and it rumbled, the headlights and other lights connected to the caged truck bed lights the scene. Each person threw themselves in, and that I climbed to the roof even as Nikki tried to buy us some time along with her semi. With so lots of them, some have been able to poke their heads in, the others appearing like meat shields. Eric let out a blood-curdling scream. I pulled out my handgun and hung myself off the threshold, holding directly to the frame, and attempted to get a clean shot within the darkish doors. I heard it gurgle and Eric stood screaming. "Hold on," I shouted, and whoever became driving, made a sharp U-flip and sped through the front gates. The body reduced into my hand as I hung on to hold from falling off. The others stood capturing, and the zombies weren't preventing to feed off of the ones shot like I was hoping. I heard Edward tell the opposite institution to flee the vicinity quickly, and we kept speeding down avenue, to place distance between us. We left at the highest pace the truck may want to cross, and did not prevent till we made it to the open area of the college. By using that point, the zombies had been a ways at the back of. I jumped off the room and right now checked on Eric. He changed into bleeding profusely. Little rivers of blood flowed between the fingers of his hand he had gripping the wound. I pulled him out and laid him on the floor. Eric rocked slightly, crying and groaning in ache. "Eric, move your hand." He slowly moved it down. "I've been bitten, fuck," he cried. I stared at the chunk, all the tooth imprinted. Nikki came down and strapped her belt round his arm above the elbow, tightly. "Jacob, get your long blade." He came quickly, blade in hand. "Start reducing." "Bella, what are you doing?" I positioned all of my weight on him, and held his arm down. Information: Jacob kneeled down and used all his strength to cut via the muscle and ruin the bone. My eye line became parallel to Eric's arm, and that I saw his blood spurt out when Jacob cut him. Eric screamed louder than before, it catching, and kicked his legs. Nikki ran and got some alcohol, poured it on the stub and wrapped it up with the gauze inside the first resource package we continually added with us on a scavenging assignment. This become imagined to be ordinary. I were given off of him and rested towards the truck's large tire, at the same time as Eric downed some of the alcohol. His severed arm lay a few inches from him. The chew was closest to his wrist. However, did the virus already spread to his upper arm? Watching him, I deduced he became high quality. It's been a minute, and he hadn't turned. "Jesus, fuck," Hayden stated. "He's going to be quality." I said. "How do you understand?" "Kill him now." I said. "He is going to be quality." I screamed. I hugged my knees to my chest and quietly sobbed. "He could have became with the aid of now," Edward stated, and laid a hand on my shoulder. The radio chirped, and Jasper requested where to fulfill us. After a minute, they rolled up next to us in a minivan and surveyed the brand new state of affairs. "Properly. Allows preserve shifting," Jasper stated, and Emmett picked up a surpassed out Eric and laid him inside the truck mattress. We divided ourselves between the two vehicles and continued onto the primary avenue to head to Denali. I decided to ride in front and sat with my eyes closed, trying to rest. That was an adrenaline rush I had never felt before and wished to never feel again. Memories flashed in my head and I squeezed my eyes shut, willing myself not to think of my close brush with death. The only thing that saved us was standing on the truck, a height a little above the zombies' heads. Too close. I jumped when something touched me. I glanced down and saw it was Edward's hand on my forearm. "Are you all right?" he said softly. "Yeah," I almost whispered. "He's going to be fine, right? Carlisle and Nikki are back there. He'll make it back and their Carlisle will stitch him up." "Okay." Emmett glanced over to us before turning back to the road. He drove with the windows up, Rosalie in the back with Esme and Alice who sat in Jasper's lap. The only way to save themselves from the smell of blood. Going 4 times the speed limit, we made the normally 3.5-hour drive in 51 minutes. Carlisle carried Eric on his back and ran ahead of us to the camp without being seen by the new additions to our group. He'll warn the Denali's about them. So you've been living at the top of this mountain? Noah asked as we hiked. I turned. I was in the lead, then Edward, Noah and the rest hiking up the hill in a clump. Yes, 9 weeks now, Edward answered. Great choice. The virus hasn't adapted to the cold yet, Noah said with a grin. I got the feeling he very much loved his job. You said you're a virologist. Do you think there could be a cure? I asked him. Well, maybe, if a vaccine is created. But live samples of their DNA is needed. Biochemists need to extract a protein, connect it to vectors and duplicate that DNA a billion times by growing it in bacteria. Then treat the spliced DNA and vectors with restriction enzymes that will cut into the virus, DNA at specific locations when it makes it into the virus, nuclei. It's a PCR, or polymerase chain reaction technique that will disintegrate the virus from the inside but will also cause the human body's immune system to attack the cells the vaccine is trying to get into. Double warfare, he said excitedly. I was going to be a biochemist but I didn't want to work for a pharmaceutical company making vaccines. I furrowed my eyebrows. I could only understand protein and spliced from biology class. But it bypassed the immune system the first time. Nikki said, that's why there's a chance it might not work. The virus has managed to avoid stimulating the immune system when it infected the body. But if a vaccine using this technique activates it, the immune system will then attack the invaded virus cells, because it's an invasion of something foreign, a reinfection of the virus because the vaccine is based off it and therefore a simulation for the immune system to safely develop immunity. The vaccine attached to the infected cells and virus would be like a red flag. The immune system can't miss it now. With the immune system activated, T lymphocyte cells will be produced which will also attack the virus. There are dubbed memory cells because they remember what they've encountered before and jump to fighting the virus when it reappears in the body. Like the common cold. In other words, if an uninfected person gets the vaccine, their body develops immunity and if they get bitten, their immune system can eradicate the virus all by itself. It will take many shots, like with rabies which is similar to this virus. However, the virus completely takes over the healthy cells by invading them and replicating itself using the human cell's ability to divide. That's one way it spreads. The first way is the virus invading healthy cells. So, the vaccine may not catch up to the virus and not be a cure. The person will still turn. I said, right, if a person who was recently bitten was pumped with a few shots of this vaccine, it may work. But it's just a theory. But what about the uninfected cells? Will the vaccine infect the person with the virus? I asked. No, because it isn't a live vaccine which is made up of a weakened version of the virus. It's the actual virus only made weaker. The vaccine with this PCR technique will be free-floating DNA and will flow through the bloodstream till it latches onto an infected cell or virus. It's made to invade those, not a healthy cell. It's in its DNA. He grinned at his own joke. So essentially the person will become virus-free. But if the person is too far gone, perhaps the chances of bringing them back lessens. He said, but you need a lab for this. I said, yes, and I will have one when we make it to Britain. He said with a smile. If he makes it. They didn't notice Carlisle and Eric's absence at all. At the mountaintop, the gate was already opened, and Eleazar stood by to close it behind us. It took a vampire to close that door. He introduced himself to the others and referred to Carmen and the other women as his wife and daughters. Inside, Carmen, Tanya, Irina, and Kate waited with slightly more food for dinner. They exchanged pleasantries, introduced Brent, and we got to eating. Though I didn't want to eat, my stomach wanted food so I forced it all down, not wanting any to go to waste. Carlisle came down from upstairs, snuck in, and claimed to not be hungry. The others did the same while the Denali's claimed to have eaten before. The newcomers were clearly hungry and they were all noticeably happier at the hot, home-cooked meal. After a few minutes, allowing them to almost finish their meal, Carlisle started telling the Denali's about the radio call. I stared at them to watch their reaction while I lowered my glass of water. Britain, Eleazar said, sounding surprised, and grabbed Carmen's hand. She and the other women looked concerned. Yes, I'd like for you to come with us. We, of course, have to go. Carlyle said. We had to go because 7 out of 14 of us were human. I appreciate the offer, my friend, but I think what is best for our family is to stay here. Eleazar responded. I knew the Denalis didn't have perfect control, but I thought they would try to get away from here. But that's suicide, Liard said. Besides, we may be able to help any other survivors roaming around and send them your way. He said, looking at him. He turned back to Carlyle. This is our home, and we will defend our home. I couldn't help but wonder if they truly decided to die, or if they were going to drop their vegetarian lifestyle in order to survive. But the sterilization, I said under my breath. If we change our minds, we'll find you there, Eleazar said. Well, all right, Carlyle surrendered. You better get going if you're going to make it. We'll miss you, Esme said, and she pulled Carmen into a tight hug. We'll miss you more, Carmen said. The rest of us moved to say goodbye. Though I knew Tanya still liked Edward, we've still become friends. So did the wolves with them despite their stink. Our group split in half, one mix going upstairs to repack bags and the other rationing and packing food. The newcomers were dressed in proper winter clothing that was tight so nothing snagged on anything and nothing can really grab them by it. With the fabric stretched across tightly, it's hard to get a grip. They had the essentials like hats, gloves, and hiking boots, but we filled in the underwear department. I finished my part and went to grab some food so Eric was quickly fed and we could leave. He was laying in his bed in the boys' room, face gray, and Nikki was replacing the bandages he bled through. The sight of it almost made me gag. I knocked on the door lightly with my knuckle. Hey, he rolled his head to the side to look at me. Hey, Nikki wrapped things up and left us alone. Sorry about your arm, I said awkwardly and sat by his bedside. Sake, better than being a zombie. Hurt like hell though, he said and looked at me with a strange look in his eye. Sorry, how did you know it would work? I didn't. I'm glad it did. Are you in any pain? He was silent for a moment. Yeah, he finally said. Right. Dumb question. I brought you food. Good thing you're awake. We're moving out in a few minutes, so eat up. I can't really stomach that right now. No offense, Bella, but you did cut my arm off. I'm a little scared of you. Oh right, I understand. I'll leave. I put the steel bowl on the nightstand and quickly left the room. I skipped down the stairs to tell Emmett Eric was ready to go and caught Edward crossing the living room with a heavy-duty bin of rations. I turned when I felt a presence behind me. It was the Denalis, watching us leave one by one. I hope we see each other again, I said. I hope they remained as they were, and our friends. Eleazar nodded and the women gave me a warm smile. I smiled at them before leaving the house. I ran down the slope to where the cars were hidden at the half point to the camp. The Denalis had helped move everything down so the truck was packed and ready to go except for 3 things. I picked up a bag that sat beside the truck and threw it in. Emmett then appeared with Eric in his arms. Beside me, Edward lifted the last of our load before climbing in, and I jumped in after. The engine was started, the truck was backed up, and was driven away from home. The truck rumbled as Edward drove at 60 miles per hour down the rocky road of the mountain. The rest of the Cullens crammed themselves into the truck, while the rest of our group held on in the truck bed. Carlyle and Eric rode in the backseat of the new group's minivan, away from their sensitive noses. We're starting with 288.96 gallons of gas. We have 9 refills including the gas in our tanks. With a full tank of gas we can cover 600 miles, times 9 is 5,400 miles. Divide that by 60 miles per hour and it's 90 hours in total. The distance is 5,448 miles. Edward mumbled. We have 89 hours exactly, Jasper said flatly. Even that's cutting it close. Rosalie grumbled. Drag from weight plus the decrease in mileage per gallon. Basically we're going to need a shit ton more gas just so we can speed it up a little, I said. And that will waste gas, Edward sighed. I took out my mini calculator. If we bump it up to 70 miles per hour, I estimate we'll be running on fumes in 77.4 hours. Edward sighed. The truck takes up 12 gallons, the van 20 for the same 600 miles. Divide the distance from Denali to Cartwright by 600, we'll need 9.08 refills. Multiply that by 12 for the truck, it's 108.96 gallons. For the van it's 181.6 gallons. Add those and subtract the total gallons we have. I was saying, we need 1.6 gallons of gas to cover the last 48 miles. Emmett said, that'll be easy. I said, and when we're close to running out, we'll have 11 hours to find the last 2 gallons. It will be 3 a.m. on day 3 Alaska time. Maybe 6 a.m. if we're 3 provinces across. Edward sighed. At 5,000 miles out we'll start collecting. If we add any more weight to the cars now, the efficiency will decrease and so will our miles covered per gallon. Jasper said. At that, Edward pressed the gas till we were going 70 miles per hour. The minivan lagged for a moment before speeding up. I took out a notepad to keep track of mileage and hours, mostly to keep myself sane. It's 1:36 a.m. now. Because of the mountainous region, Edward had to drive back around through Fairbanks, at which we were prepared to shoot any zombies that made it out of the gates of the airfield. From there he used the map we found of major roads in Alaska at a tourist spot as a reference and got on Richardson Highway. We couldn't find a road atlas which had road maps of every province in Canada, but these road maps at least mapped out the entirety of its province and labeled the province capital. Capitals were often major cities with populations in the 5 figures. In those places, we would most likely find a lot more gas left behind than in small towns because more truckfuls had been delivered to meet the demand. Though the difference between the amounts found wasn't much, by skipping small towns we might waste less time and increase the amount by 50% per 2 capitals we collected from. The gas we had now was what we found on scavenging missions to be used to travel farther to look for food. We stored them in 9 gray trash bins, with a 32-gallon capacity each. We've tethered tightly to the cage around the truck bed with bungee cords. Thankfully we've amassed enough. Edward drove down Richardson to Delta Junction, then moved on to Alaska Highway, which took us across the border into Yukon Territory. Normally I would be asleep, but I was so keyed up. I wasn't the only one. Besides Eric and the passengers of the minivan, everyone was awake. Food and coffee were passed around to those who ate a while ago. Nikki had to pass it to me through the window. The coffee was in makeshift packets made from wax paper. I unfolded one side and poured the powder into my water bottle and shook it. I preferred my coffee hot, but this was fine. We stopped once so far to refill our tanks. 224.96 gallons left. By the time I was hungry again, we crossed the Yukon Territory border into British Columbia. The road we were on annoyingly weaved in and out BC until it made up its mind. The mileage counter was 1,111 miles farther along, and I calculated it's been 15 hours and 5 minutes. 61.9 hours to go. Alaska Highway had become the 97, which ran along a river. Because of that, there were state reserves, protected areas, and no towns for the first 273 miles. We had to stop a third of the way to refill again. Fort Nelson was the first town we encountered, and like Fairbanks, and all the other small towns we've crossed, it was empty of sounds, birds, and trash was bellied up by the wind. But filled with zombies, about half of the total population of that town. Nikki, Brent, and Eric used them as target practice, though it was pointless now. Maybe to take some down before we go, or out of revenge. 2 meals later, around 9:30 p.m. in BC time, the sun set. Because we weren't so far up north, we actually saw the sunset in color for the first time in over 2 months. It was quite the sight. In Denali, sunset was basically just a thick blanket of clouds that inched across the sky. It was almost suffocating. We never saw it like this. The sky today was absolutely clear of clouds, allowing the naturally born colors to glow. The northern part was a deep blue, then light blue, even lighter, then a thin streak of orange, and finally yellow. It looked like twilight. The same colors as when Edward and I were standing in my driveway when he looked up and told me it was twilight. I reached under Edward's hand and weaved my fingers into his. He smiled tenderly at me in response. "When we get there we'll stay together, right?" I asked. "This time it's forever," he said seriously with a nod. I remembered our conversation at the hot springs. Then, we won't be struggling anymore. In the backseat Alice giggled and nudged Jasper. 61 hours. till forever. I watched the sun intently until the sky became dark again. After a while I couldn't stay up any longer and fell asleep on Edward's lap. I didn't sleep for long. My body must have known I wanted to be awake for most of the ride. When I woke, we were in Alberta, the province next to BC, on Dawson Creek Tupper Highway. While rubbing the sleep from my eyes I tried to do the math. The mileage counter was 1,691 miles farther along, which meant we've been driving for 24 hours. Plus the hour we spent in Denali putting everything together. It was 11 p.m. in Alaska time or 2:30-something a.m. in Newfoundland. Isn't it already day 2 in Newfoundland? I asked. Yes, we have 2 days and 5 hours. I'm going to make sure we make it. Edward sighed, and gripped my hand tightly. I was up for 4 hours before I ended up being lulled to sleep by the constant whoosh sound the car made, and slept for the entire night. When I woke up, it seemed like nothing had changed. Everyone was still watching the scenery pass us by. How long have I been asleep for? I asked Edward, who was still driving. 12 hours. We crossed Saskatchewan and we'll soon cross Manitoba. Oh, I mumbled and turned to the road. There was nothing but pine trees on either side and clear blue skies. I found it beautiful, like we were being led to the end by a divine path. Behind me in the truck bed, Nikki and Brent were playing poker. Alice teased them with her visions of the future, and Edward threatened to spill their secrets. The stakes were high since Emmett, Jasper and Rosalie had put money on who would win. 40 hours lapsed. I wasn't much of a poker fan, so I returned to my records. I subtracted the miles we traveled from the total miles in gas we had, then divided it by 70, resulting in the number of hours it will take to make it to Cartwright. I almost had a heart attack before I realized that we had a few hours to get the remaining 1.6 gallons as Emmett had said. It would be 8 o'clock in the morning in Newfoundland now, leaving us 16 hours before midnight. By sundown, we crossed Manitoba and were 13 miles into Ontario. My sleep cycle had gone out of whack, so I ended up staying awake some of the night and going to sleep at 2 a.m. When I woke up, I thought I was still dreaming or I was elsewhere because everything was in French. What does that say? I asked. Route de Tusic. Edward sighed. I turned to look at him and stared for a second. His voice was something else when he said that. Maybe it was cliché, but I liked the way he spoke French. What? He asked. And nothing. Cool, you speak French. Route de Tusic was like driving through a prettier forks. Little white flowers peeked from the grass blades and stood out against the thick, glowing shades of green and ran beside a dark blue river. Apparently, it led straight to a town called Tusic, so we switched onto another highway, and continued on our way as normal past all the small towns with names I couldn't pronounce. Things were normal until 2 hours or so up the road, covering over 150 miles. We haven't come across another town in that distance was what was wrong. We figured it was similar to when we were in British Columbia and that we'd give it another hour before we started to worry. After a while, we did find a place called Manic Sink. Population 0, except for the staff of the B&B. It looked like a last stop to fuel up place, so only the bare necessities were available. We got out of the car and headed straight for the gas. I stood there for a few minutes and there wasn't a zombie in sight, yet, while the others tried to suck out the remaining gas. Such a place had the potential of having some or nothing at all. Damn, barely any, Jacob grumbled, a little stream of gas flowing from the hose into an empty, red gas container. How much was that? Edward asked. A few ounces or something. We still have some gas in the tanks. Maybe we'll have better luck at the next stop, Jacob said. We returned to the truck and kept going, through Relais Gabriel where we got a slightly healthier stream, then Gagnonville that didn't have a gas station at all, and Labrador City, the first city we crossed in Newfoundland, where we scored nearly 2 gallons. By our estimate, we needed 4 to get both cars to make it. Just a few ounces more. We could only get a little stream at Churchill Falls, but after that was Happy Valley Goose Bay where our chances looked good. The sun had already set about 4 hours ago. It was midnight midnight in AK time now, between 7 and 8 a.m. in NL. Daylight hours and the time we had left lined up perfectly. We hated doing things at night, we avoided it whenever we could. None of us had night vision, so we couldn't see zombies or others. We had to rely on sound and sometimes smell. But a pro of going at night was that you could hide in the shadows amongst dead bodies and not be found. In broad daylight there was no hiding, you just had to kill them before they killed you. Driving past the welcome sign, all we saw was what we recognized to be a small airport so people could travel to other remote places like in Alaska. Is that it? I mumbled. Sometimes, in Alaska, there was just an airport and not a single house. We'll have to go deeper then, Edward mumbled and continued driving. When we finally made it, we decided we would go on foot to avoid burning any more of the gas that would take us close to Cartwright Airport than necessary. Since the new group didn't know how we liked to do things, we divided ourselves and then them between our groups. Edward, Noah, Eric, and I were one group, Jordan, Carlisle and Esme another, Leard, Hayden, Jacob and Quill the third, then Brent, Nikki, Jasper and Alice, and lastly Lissa, Juno, Rosalie and Emmett. We had to split 3 semis, 6 hunting rifles, a bow, throwing knives, a machete and a hunting knife, minus the blade I always had strapped to my thigh, amongst 19 people. And the bow was pretty much useless in close combat. Our walkie-talkies had also run out of battery that we used to recharge using a generator, but we'd be quick about things. We'll meet back here in an hour, Carlisle said. We should be able to cover a mile in that time, Jasper noted. I took my handgun out of its holster and gave it to Lissa. Eric's rifle and my bow were enough. With a jug or empty water bottle for each group to store the gas we found, we split up. My group walked with Leard and Carlisa's until we reached a park and Leard led his group to the other side of it and Carlisle said his group would take the northeast side. Ours continued farther up north. So far we were able to run past the zombies, taking down a few with my arrows, that the zombies didn't react to, but the number of them didn't lessen. Their numbers increased exponentially as we passed the park and we hadn't gone very far into our area yet. Edward signaled with his fingers that we would hide by a dumpster then go down the avenue. I scurried behind him then I heard loud metal clattering. I turned and saw Eric fumbling to pick up his gun. I immediately glanced to my right and the zombies, even from several blocks up the street, started running towards us. At the sound of the stampede, zombies from the park were running towards here. Remind me what the population was, Edward asked. 8,109, I said. Looks about right. Without looking, I ran to the east, down the avenue. A few were running towards us in that direction and without slowing down I turned towards where we came to get back to Rosalie's team. I looked behind me for a brief moment and saw it was just me, Noah and Eric. There were so many behind us and I didn't want to lead them all to where we had parked, so I ran into a small market with its doors wide open to try to use it like a bottleneck and trap the horde inside while we ran out of its cellar doors out onto the sidewalk. In here, I yelled. I headed straight for the meat section where there would be a door the butchers carried the packaged meat out. It was propped open with a door stopper. As soon as Eric and Noah were clear, I closed the knob door, it locking automatically, and we started looking for the basement door. The zombies growled and banged against the door. We found it quickly in the small, rotten butcher back section and trekked down the concrete steps into the dark basement, pulling the door closed over our heads. Right now a flashlight would come in handy, but it was attached to my backpack in the truck. We fumbled in the door until we found it and by then the horde had broken through the door upstairs. Eric and Noah pushed short stacks of crates over to create a barrier while I got the doors open. The cellar door from inside the store gave in from the horde's weight, and they fell into the basement. Noah climbed onto the boxes while Eric shot at them, then turned to pull him up. He slammed against our barrier, toppling it, and those still alive started climbing over it. I kicked at their heads hard, but more climbed over their bodies, the height giving them an advantage. Next to me, Noah was fighting to keep from their grasp himself. I wanted to save myself but them too. A classmate or a virologist? My brain asked me. Noah, let's go. I had already undid the latch, and he and I pushed the rusty doors open, and I pushed him out onto the street, crawling out after him. Just go, Eric yelled. Don't miss the fucking plane. I looked inside before closing the doors, and saw him against the wall, his stump holding up the rifle, geared to keep shooting. The doors slammed shut and Noah and I ran down the street. We were a few feet away when we saw the other groups and Edward jumping into the cars. On either side of the road, I saw they were running from their own problems. Wait, Carlisle's Nikki said as I jumped into the truck bed. I looked around quickly and saw Esme crying in the corner, almost fighting Edward, who was consoling her, to go back. Just go, Edward growled. Where's Eric? Jacob asked. I stayed silent. Jasper stepped on the gas hard and drove off full throttle to break through the undead in front of us. Do we at least have enough? I heard Jasper say. Not really, Rosalie responded. We turned at the corner and went back on the road we came in, the townspeople running after us. When we made it out, he slowed down to avoid burning off the gas we had too fast. The horde remained a black dot far away behind us. Hayden, Noah asked Liard. Liard nodded. I put my head between my legs and willed myself not to think of anything. After a while of driving in silence, I've mastered staring at passing scenery and focused at nothing else. A long time later the sun went down and the scenery hadn't changed at all. It was common, but it made it hard to tell if we were close. When we felt the car slowing down, we looked around as if we were lost. What's happening? I asked. We're out of gas, Jasper said. Get the flashlights, let's start running. We have no idea how much time we have. The Cullens got out of the truck and started running down the road. The rest of us stumbled out of the truck bed after a moment and ran after them, turning the lights on. We jogged for a while before picking up the pace. I focused on my breathing so I didn't go out of breath quickly and would last longer. Our ribs started cramping at some point, of course, and we were struggling to keep going at the same pace, dry mouth and out of breath. We're almost there, Edward said to us. Everything we've been through, everyone who's died, this will make it worth it. We're going to make it, Quill said. At that, we all pushed ourselves to go faster. We ran like zombies were chasing after us. One last run from zombies. We kept going, and pulled each other forward when we slowed down. In front of me Rosalie and Emmett were holding hands. On my left, Liard and Nikki were helping Brent keep at our pace. At my right were the rest. Hurry, I see the checkpoint, Edward shouted, and pointed at something down the road. Wait, what if it's a trap? I screamed. I didn't really know why I said it myself. It can't be, Liard huffed. I dunno, I'm just scared, I said, and remained quiet. Does anybody hear that? Lissa asked. Hear what? Noah asked her. Like there's more footsteps. You're just psyching yourself out, Liard told her. Lissa pointed her flashlight behind us for a moment before turning back. There wasn't anyone at the checkpoint. Of course there wasn't. It wasn't safe, but the Cullens could see the airstrip from here, down the road on our left. As we got closer, we could see lots of lights and make out the silhouette of an army cargo plane behind the fence. It was the same chain-linked fence with barbed wire like at the airfield, but there wasn't a door here. Fuck it, climb. They'll know we're humans because of our flashlights, Edward said. He and Jasper stayed on the ground while the rest of us climbed first. Don't get cut on the wire, Jasper warned. I grasped the outer side of the fence with one hand and the inner side with the other, but my jacket got snagged on the spikes. I tugged at it hard and lost my grip, falling past the others who were climbing down, full force onto my leg. Oh, fuck, I covered my mouth to try and muffle my cries. Don't cry, don't cry. Edward quickly came over and gripped my knee to see if it was broken. No, I screamed. It's okay, he said to me, and picked me up in his arms. He turned to make sure everyone was on this side before walking towards the airstrip. Silhouettes of soldiers with large guns appeared and we stopped for a second, then they moved to where the work lights were. The hatch of the plane was open and its ramp on, but we went towards them first. Do you have any weapons on you? One of them asked. No, we left them behind, Edward answered. Are any of you infected? Someone with a white armband with a red cross on it came to us. No, Edward responded. The army doc checked each of our eyes for any sign of infection before letting us pass. All right, go on, the man said, lowering his weapon. We started up the ramp and someone inside told us where to buckle up and how. The soldiers helped us do that while the ramp was retracted and the hatch closed. The blades on the roof whirred loudly as the plane was started, and we were shaken roughly when it took off. They're here, the pilot said. Out the window, I could see the zombies clutching the fence where they could, climbing on top of each other, over and over, and were nearly over the top when the plane changed direction and I couldn't see anymore. Today was the day I would be introduced to the new doctor joining the team who were responsible for saving my life. I was told he moved here recently, very recently actually. He's been in the city a few days. I'm not quite sure what the feeling is, when something just happens, when life just goes on around me while I die. It's not sadness, I guess it's anticipation. No matter what happens, no matter how many doctors come and go, it's all the same. Nina entered my room with breakfast, interrupting my thoughts. "Good morning, Bella. Had a good sleep?" she asked. She pulled the foldable table over my lap and sat the tray down. It didn't look appetizing at all except for the jello. "Yeah, surprisingly," I said, reaching for the cherry jello. "I met your doctor. He's quite the hunk," she gushed. I laughed. "He wanted to introduce himself but I told him I didn't know if you were awake." "I'm ready to meet him." I put down the hello. She took up my brush and started brushing my hair. "What time did Mom and Dad leave last night?" I asked. "Pretty late. You know them." "Yeah, I keep telling them not to stay late. They can't keep sleeping over." She gave my hair one last pat, signaling she was done. "Do I look presentable?" It was almost a joke. I was in a hospital gown, in bed. "You're a natural beauty, Bella. I'll go get him for you," she said and left my room. I shook out the barely warming hospital blanket and tried to tidy the bed up. It's never easy. I never got used to it, meeting a healthy person who was facing someone who was dying. Awkward doesn't even cover it. It was quiet for a while, then I heard a knock and in came. "Good morning." "Morning. Don't let me interrupt your breakfast, nutrition is important." "No worries, I always finish my food and what my parents bring me." I can confirm hospital food is as bad as they say. I joked. He chuckled. "You won't tattle on me, right?" I asked. Outside food was forbidden to patients for the most part. "Of course not. I'm Dr. Carlisle Cullen. I will lead your treatment from now on but you can refer to me by first name." "Oh okay. Then, just call me Bella." "Most do." "Good to see you're in high spirits. Things will run smoother," I smiled lightly. "I'm going to ask you some questions and just answer honestly." "All right. How are you feeling today?" Nauseous, sore, uncomfortable but I can grin and bear it." He nodded thoughtfully and took notes down. "How are you feeling, mentally?" "That's an odd question." Fine. I'm fine. Though for the most part, cancer is treated physically but mental health plays an equally important part. Positivity, hope, a reason to keep fighting is as helpful as medicine. I want to make sure you're as close to an ideal state in each respect." I couldn't help but look away. It took a moment for me to answer which he expected based on his silence. "I'm okay. I've been fighting this long enough. I've had the typical, 'These are your chances, these are your choices,' talk. We were hopeful, my parents and I, but over time I understood I was in the deep end. My parents are the ones suffering and who will continue to suffer. The doctors who've come and gone too. I'm okay with dying, but I don't think anyone else is." I laughed. "I'll try anything, Carlisle, but it isn't your job to cure me," I told him. "It's to try to cure me, nothing more. If I die it's not on you." "I understand. Most terminally ill patients come to accept their fate, admirable, while I still believe it to be unfair. Forgive me if I pity you." "Sure." I smiled more widely. That was the first time someone said that sort of thing to me. "I just came to introduce myself, you won't get prodded today. I'll check on you tomorrow. Keep busy, or the boredom will get to you," I laughed. "Yeah, it was a pleasure meeting you." "Wait, I only told you that because, well, I didn't get the chance to tell the others," I said, heat rushing to my cheeks. He gave me a nod and bowed out of the room. "Did that go well?" Nina asked. "Yeah, it was almost funny. It wasn't awkward at all, like the elephant in the room wasn't there. He knew death inside out somehow. I guess because he's a doctor, but he didn't talk to me like I was a lost cause." Nina was so right though. He was a handsome doctor but unlike her I got a father vibe from him. I pulled my tray to close and ate breakfast without tasting it. The end.